Hey everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is The House Sitter's Guide Left by the Owners Defies the Laws of Physics. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The first thing I noticed was that the hallway was too long. Not dramatically long. Not the kind of thing you'd point at and say, "That is impossible," because people hate being the first person to sound stupid in an empty house. It was just longer than it had been when I carried my duffel in. I knew that because the owners had left a runner rug down the center of it, faded red with blue diamonds, and I had counted the steps without meaning to. 12 from the kitchen archway to the guest room. 12 exactly, because the rug had a coffee stain shaped like Oregon right near the end, and I had stepped over it with my left foot. Now, standing there with a chipped mug of tap water in my hand and rain whispering against the windows, it took 18 steps to reach the same stain. I stopped with my sock half on it. Behind me, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the walls, the heat clicked on with a sound like knuckles tapping once and changing their mind. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil, wet cedar, and that dry paper smell you get from old books left too close to a radiator. I looked back toward the kitchen. The archway was still there. The brass light switch was still crooked. The little framed print of Crater Lake was still hanging slightly off center. Old house, I said out loud, because talking to yourself counts as a tool if you do it with enough confidence. My name is Mara Bell, 27, female. And at the time I was living in Portland, Oregon, in a studio apartment above a laundromat that made all my clothes smell permanently like dryer sheets and overheated coins. I house sat when I could because the money was better than dog walking and quieter than bartending, which I had done badly for 6 months before admitting I hated strangers when they were drunk and holding wet receipts. I had a careful face, people told me. Trustworthy, sensible, the kind of person who locked doors twice and read instructions. That last part mattered more than it should have. The house belonged to the Vosses, a couple I had met through a friend of a friend who worked with them at Oregon Health and Science University. Their place sat on a slope in Arlington Heights, west of downtown, high enough that the city lights showed through the trees at night like someone had spilled jewelry down the hill. It was a narrow, old, 3-story craftsman with green shingles, a steep roof, and more windows than seemed smart for a city where rain could come sideways. They were going to Zurich for 11 days. A conference first, then 2 nights just for us, as Mrs. Voss had said, smiling in a way that made me feel like I'd been handed something delicate and private. My job was simple: feed the cat, water the greenhouse, bring in packages, and follow the house guide. Not instructions. Guide. It sat on the kitchen table when I arrived, bound in a black 3-ring binder with a label printed in neat all caps. House Sitter's Guide. Please read before sunset. That was dramatic, obviously. People with enough money for custom cabinetry develop odd habits. Still, I read it. I always read things. Medication labels, rental agreements, emergency exit maps in hotel rooms. My mother used to joke that I came out of the womb looking for the terms and conditions. It wasn't a cute quirk, not really. It came from being the oldest kid in a house where nobody else checked the stove. Nobody else remembered whether the door had been locked. Nobody else noticed Dad's truck keys sitting in the ignition all night with the battery draining. If something went wrong, I had learned early. It usually meant I had missed a sign. So I sat at the Voss's polished kitchen table while the October light thinned behind the Douglas firs and read every page. Wi-Fi network VOSS 5G, password taped under router. Cat Figaro, male, 11, black and white, diabetic. Insulin in fridge. Injection after breakfast and dinner. Do not chase if he hides under the blue chair. Trash, Tuesday morning before 7 a.m. Greenhouse, missed orchids. Do not overwater tomatoes. Latch door firmly because raccoons have figured out the handle. All ordinary, almost sweet. Then the guide changed. Interior movement notes. If the second floor hallway appears longer than usual, do not measure it twice. If the pantry door opens onto the laundry room, close it and wait 10 minutes. Do not place any object weighing more than 5 pounds on the landing between 2:10 a.m. and 2:40 a.m. The northeast window in the study may show incorrect weather. Rely on your phone. If you hear water running below the basement, do not attempt to locate it. I laughed when I read that page. Not a big laugh, more like air leaving through my nose. Very funny, I said to the empty kitchen. Figaro, the cat, watched me from the doorway with the flat disappointment of an animal who had seen guests come and go, and had ranked me somewhere between a lamp and a badly trained intern. He had a white chin, one folded ear, and the dense, heavy body of a cat who had never missed a meal except under medical protest. When I crouched and offered my fingers, he sniffed once, sneezed, and walked away. Fair, I said. The Vosses had shown me around earlier that afternoon before their lift came. Leonard Voss, 54, male, was a German-born structural engineer with silver hair clipped close to his skull, frameless glasses, and a habit of pausing before he answered even simple questions, as if he had to inspect the sentence for load-bearing weaknesses. His wife, Helen Voss, 52, female, was American, a pediatric neurologist with warm hands, quick eyes, and an exhausted kindness that made me want to do a good job for her. They moved through the house with the practiced choreography of people who knew every creak. The kitchen lights flicker if the microwave is running, Helen told me, opening and closing cabinets. Old wiring, allegedly safe. The electrician said not to worry, which is exactly what electricians say before they charge you $700. Leonard had stood near the staircase, one hand on the newel post. The binder is thorough, he said. Some items may seem strange. I waited for the punchline. None came. Helen gave him a look. Len, he adjusted his glasses. The house is old. It has settled unevenly. Doors stick. Floors slope. Reflections can be misleading at night. That's his way of saying don't panic if the place feels weird, Helen said, turning back to me. And please text if Figaro refuses food. He's manipulative, but he's also old. I had nodded like a professional. I wanted the job. 11 days in Arlington Heights meant I could pay the late fee on my studio and maybe replace the tire on my Honda that had been making a low, rhythmic thump since Beaverton. Their lift horn chirped outside. Helen pressed a set of keys into my palm. We're reachable by WhatsApp. Time difference will be annoying, but not impossible. Leonard added, read the guide before sunset. Again, not smiling. And now, 3 hours later, the hallway had stretched by 6 steps, I stood in it with my mug, listening to the soft buzz of a light bulb above me. The bulb was one of those old decorative ones, amber and thin, hanging inside a frosted glass shade. It made the hallway look underwater. Family photos lined the wall. Helen in hiking gear near Mount Hood, Leonard standing beside a bridge model, both of them younger, sunburned, grinning beside a boy of about 10, whose face appeared in only 3 pictures before vanishing from the later ones. I didn't look too long. It felt rude. I backed into the guest room and put my mug down on the dresser. The room was clean in the severe way guest rooms are clean when nobody expects guests they actually like. White sheets, 2 pillows, 1 quilt folded at the foot, a ceramic dish for keys, a closet with wooden hangers. Through the window, I could see a wet tangle of rhododendrons, and beyond them, the dim blink of traffic moving along Burnside. My phone buzzed on the bed. It was a text from my younger brother, Owen. "You alive in the Rich People Museum?" I typed back, "Define alive." Owen Bell, 22 male, lived across town in Gresham, with 2 roommates and a half-finished automotive certificate he kept promising to return to when work slowed down. He had our father's grin and our mother's ability to make bad decisions sound like weather. He also had a talent for calling at the exact moment I had started pretending I was fine. He called before I could put the phone down. "I was kidding," he said when I answered. "Unless you are dead, in which case press 1. I'm house sitting, not exploring a mine. Rich houses have mines, wine mines, cheese caves." I sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed at a nick on my thumb where a key ring had caught skin. "It's nice. Weird, but nice." Weird how? The question landed too neatly. I looked at the open bedroom door. From where I sat, I could see the hallway runner. 12 feet of it, maybe. 15. Normal enough from this angle. "The owners left a binder," I said. "Like emergency numbers." Like emergency numbers, cat medicine, and a note saying not to measure the hallway twice if it gets longer. Owen was quiet for half a beat, then laughed. "Oh, I love rich people. I think they're messing with me, obviously. That's what people do when they have a breakfast nook. They didn't seem like prank people. Nobody seems like prank people until they own a gong." I smiled despite myself. Rain ticked against the glass in small, uneven taps. Owen's voice softened. "You good, though, for real?" That was his version of asking about my anxiety without using the word. He hated that word. Thought it made things sound clinical and permanent. I didn't love it either, but at least it had edges. Without a name, it became everything. Locked doors, stove knobs, unread messages, a hallway that might or might not be longer. "I'm good," I said. "You sure?" "I'm sure." The house gave a small sound then, not a bang, not a footstep. A muted wooden pop from somewhere below, followed by a faint drag, like a heavy drawer sliding shut 1 floor down. I stopped breathing for a second so I could listen better. Owen noticed. "What? Nothing. You did the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you go quiet like a rabbit heard a lawn mower." I stood and walked to the doorway. Something shifted downstairs. House settling. Yeah, old houses make noises. You know this. Remember Aunt Linda's place in Eugene? That house sounded like it was chewing at night. This was different. "Mara, I know." I hated how he said my name when he thought I was spiraling, gentle, but tired underneath. I could hear the future in it, everyone I loved learning to speak to me like I was a skittish dog. "I'll call you later," I said. "Send me a picture of the binder." "No, why not?" "Because you'll make memes." "Correct." I hung up before he could ask again. For a while I stayed still, phone in hand, listening. The heat clicked. Water moved through pipes. Figaro's collar bell gave a tiny metallic twitch somewhere downstairs. Then the kitchen light flickered. I told myself it was the microwave, even though I hadn't used it. Downstairs, the guide waited on the table. I went because not going would have been worse. That was the stupid truth about fear. Avoiding the thing gave it more room. So I walked the hallway without counting, kept my eyes on the stair rail, and descended to the first floor. The stairs creaked under my socks. Fourth step from the bottom, deeper than the others. The kind of sound you learn immediately in someone else's house. The kitchen looked exactly as I'd left it. Warm bulbs under the cabinets, copper pots hanging over the island, rain tracking silver lines down the dark window above the sink. Figaro sat beside his bowl, staring at the refrigerator as if expecting it to apologize. "Did you make that noise?" I asked him. He blinked slowly. Helpful. The binder was open to the strange page. I had not left it open. That was what I thought first. Then I remembered I might have. I had read it, laughed, flipped pages back and forth. Maybe I'd gone upstairs without closing it. Maybe the draft from the heating vent had moved the pages. Maybe Figaro had pawed it, though he looked like a cat morally opposed to labor. The page had a yellow sticky note on it. I was certain that had not been there. It was stuck beside rule number 4. The northeast study window may show incorrect weather. Rely on your phone. The note was written in blue pen. Small block letters. Start here if you notice length CHANGES. I stared at it until the letters stopped looking like letters and became little arrangements of ink. "Okay," I said, too quietly. My first sensible thought was that the Vosses had a security system with motion detection and remote access. Maybe they had seen me walking around, noticed I had found the hallway weird, and somehow, sent a robot to place a sticky note. That was ridiculous. My second thought was worse. Someone else was in the house. I checked the back door. Locked, front door. Locked, mudroom door. Locked, deadbolt turned, windows. At least the visible ones, latched. My phone had 2 bars. I opened WhatsApp and typed to Helen Voss. "Hi Helen, sorry to bother you so soon. Did you leave a sticky note in the guide that says, start here if you notice length CHANGES? I did not send it. I stood there with my thumb over the arrow, imagining her receiving that message at whatever hour it was in Zurich, and deciding the anxious house sitter was already inventing problems. I imagined losing the job, the late fee, the tire. Owen's voice saying, "You good though?" The refrigerator hummed louder, then clicked off. In the sudden softer room, I heard rainwater running in the gutters and a car hissing along the wet street outside. Normal sounds, Portland sounds. The world had not tilted. The house had not swallowed me. It was a sticky note and a hallway in an old building owned by people who had warned me the place felt weird. I put the phone face down. "Start here," I read aloud. The binder had tabs. The strange rules belonged to a section marked interior movement. Behind it were diagrams. Not ghost diagrams. Actual floor plans printed from some architectural program with measurements written in Leonard's neat handwriting. First floor. Second floor. Basement. Study. Greenhouse, pantry, laundry. Arrows between rooms, some black, some red, some dotted. The northeast study was on the first floor, through the living room, past a pocket door. I had skipped it during the tour because the Vosses said I wouldn't need it. That now seemed less like a detail and more like a dare. Figaro made a rough little sound behind me. Not a meow. A complaint dragged through gravel. He walked to the living room entrance, stopped, and looked back at me. "No," I said. "Don't do that." He did it again, softer. I picked up the binder because leaving it felt worse than carrying it. The pages were heavier than normal printer paper, smooth under my fingers, faintly warm from the kitchen lights. I also took my phone, the key ring, and a small metal flashlight from the junk drawer labeled, absurdly, Power OUTAGES/raccoons. The living room was dimmer than the kitchen. Tall windows reflected the lamps back at me in yellow smears. Bookshelves climbed both walls, interrupted by framed maps of Portland from different decades. The floorboards gave under my weight in subtle waves, as if the house were breathing very slowly through its joints. At the pocket door, I stopped. From the other side came a sound like rain against glass. That made sense. It was raining. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. A weather alert from the National Weather Service. Rain ending in Portland area by 8:15 p.m. Dry conditions overnight. I looked toward the living room windows. Rain still moved down them in threads. Maybe the alert was wrong. Forecasts were wrong all the time. Weather changed fast around the West Hills. One cloud could get caught over one neighborhood and dump water, while the rest of the city went dry. Simple, explainable. I slid the pocket door open. The study smelled like dust, printer toner, and old wood polish. A banker's lamp glowed on the desk, though I didn't remember turning it on during the tour. The northeast window took up almost half the far wall. Outside it, snow was falling. Not a dusting, not sleet mistaken for snow in bad light. Snow, thick, slow flakes floating past black fir branches, gathering along the sill in soft white ridges. The glass looked cold enough to touch. Behind me, in the living room, rain tapped steadily against the windows. I did not move. The flashlight felt slick in my palm. My phone said it was 7:42 p.m., 46 degrees, light rain. Study window showed a winter night. For a long time, I stood in the doorway with the binder tucked against my ribs, listening to two kinds of weather touch the same house. Then Figaro slipped past my ankle, crossed the study carpet, and jumped onto the desk with the stiff effort of an old cat. He sat beside the lamp and looked at the window, then at me, as if waiting to see whether I would follow the rule or make myself useful. The guide page trembled slightly in my hand. Rule 4 said to rely on my phone. The sticky note said to start here. On the desk, under the green light of the banker's lamp, lay a brass window latch, polished bright from use. I could close the study door, text Helen, and spend the night pretending old houses did old house things. Or I could step inside and check whether the glass was cold. I stayed at the threshold, 1 foot on the living room floor, 1 foot over the study carpet, and tried to decide which kind of mistake I was about to make. I did not touch the glass. That sounds braver than it was. It wasn't discipline or good judgment. It was the way my hand simply refused to move past the halfway point, fingers suspended in the study air, while snow fell outside a window that should have looked out at wet trees and Portland's soaked orange streetlights. Behind me, the living room windows kept ticking with rain. In front of me, the northeast window made no sound at all. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute, the binder pressed tight against my ribs, waiting for my brain to arrange the facts into something I could live with. A window can show the wrong thing, That was possible. Screens existed. Projections existed. Rich people put stupid, expensive technology in houses all the time. Maybe Leonard Voss had installed some weather display behind special glass because engineers got lonely and started building problems for themselves. Then Figaro sneezed. The sound snapped me out of it so hard I nearly dropped the binder. He sat on the desk beside the banker's lamp, unimpressed, his folded ear twitching. The brass latch beside him gleamed. Beneath it, on the blotter, lay another printed sheet I had not noticed at first because it was partly tucked under a stack of mail. If window discrepancy is observed, verify phone weather. Do not open window. Check basement dehumidifier within 15 minutes. If dehumidifier has stopped, restart breaker B7. If water is visible at floor drain, move Figaro's insulin and all paper records to second floor guest room. Do not call emergency services unless structural damage is visible. I read it twice, then a third time faster. Basement, I said. Figaro blinked as if he had suggested that already. That was the concrete thing, the thing I could hold on to. A dehumidifier, a breaker, water. Old houses on hills got water intrusion. Basements flooded in Portland all the time when gutters clogged or sump pumps failed. The study window could be a dumb prank, a malfunctioning smart glass panel, a reflection from some outside display I hadn't noticed. But water in a basement was real. Water ruined furnaces, electrical panels, records. Water drowned old cats if they hid somewhere stupid. Water turned expensive house sitting into a lawsuit, and the instructions said 15 minutes. My phone said 7:46 p.m. I backed out of the study and slid the pocket door shut harder than I meant to. The wood thumped into place, and the sound carried through the living room, flat and final. Okay, I said, we are doing the normal problem. Figaro hopped off the desk with a heavy thud and followed me, which made me feel less alone and more watched. The basement door was off the kitchen, beside a narrow pantry lined with labeled jars of lentils, rice, flour, and things I had no intention of learning how to cook. The door itself was painted the same green as the trim, with a brass hook and eye latch high up on the frame. Another sticky label had been placed just under the latch. Basement, shoes required. I looked down at my socks. Of course, the mudroom held my sneakers, still damp from the walk-in. I shoved my feet into them without untying the laces, grabbed the flashlight, and opened the binder to the basement section. The diagrams showed the stairwell, the furnace room, a storage alcove, and something labeled lower access. Do not enter in Leonard's neat, blocky handwriting. Not helpful. The basement light switch clicked when I pressed it. Nothing happened. My first real pulse of fear came then, not from the impossible window or the hallway, but from that ordinary failure. A switch, a click, and darkness refusing to move. Power outage. No, the kitchen lights were still on. The fridge hummed. The microwave clock glowed green. Bulbs out, I said. My voice sounded too dry. I turned on the flashlight. Its beam was weak at first, then steadied into a narrow cone. Dust moved inside it. The stairs descended steeply, unfinished wood, with rubber strips nailed to the front edge. The air rising from below smelled cold and mineral heavy, like wet concrete and pennies. From somewhere beneath the house came the faintest mechanical stutter. R-R-R-R, Pause. RRRR. Pause. A dehumidifier trying and failing to start. I checked the time. 7:49. 15 minutes, I said, and stepped down. Each stair creaked under me, a different pitch, a rotten little tune. Halfway down, the kitchen light behind me flickered once, and my shadow jumped ahead onto the basement wall. I stopped and held the railing until the world settled. It was fine. It was a house. Houses had systems. Systems failed. The basement floor was bare concrete, painted gray long ago and worn through in paths. Shelves lined one wall, packed with plastic bins, paint cans, old storm windows, a box labeled Bennis School Keep in black marker. I looked away from that one quickly. The boy in the photos. Their son, maybe. None of my business. The dehumidifier sat near the furnace, squat and beige, with a hose running into a floor drain. Its display flashed E3 in red. Every few seconds, the motor tried to kick on and gave up with a cough. Water glistened around the drain. Not much. A shallow crescent spreading beneath the hose, maybe a 1/4 inch deep at the lowest point. But water reflects light in a way that makes a small amount look like a warning. I moved closer, careful with my steps. The floor sloped toward the drain, which should have been good. The problem was that the drain was not taking the water. A brown ring of grit circled the grate. Pine needles, mud, a dead beetle, something fibrous like insulation. Great, I whispered. I crouched and reached toward it, then remembered the guide. If you hear water running below the basement, do not attempt to locate it. I wasn't locating water. I was clearing a drain, totally different. Practical. The flashlight slipped under my arm as I tried to balance it between chin and shoulder. My fingers touched cold water. I pinched the wad of debris and pulled. It came up longer than expected. A strip of soaked paper, rolled tight as a cigarette, brown and pulpy. I dropped it onto the floor. The drain gurgled once, but did not open. From below the grate came a sound like water moving fast through a narrow pipe. I leaned back. Nope, I said, breaker first. The electrical panel was on the far wall behind the furnace. Its metal door had been labeled with more care than any panel I had ever seen. B7 basement, humidity control / auxiliary pump. Auxiliary pump. That word changed everything. A pump meant water needed moving. A pump meant if the breaker failed, the basement could fill. A pump meant the Vosses had known this was possible and had buried the warning between strange window notes and hallway instructions like they were all the same category of inconvenience. I flipped B7 off, waited 5 seconds, and flipped it on. For one beautiful moment, nothing happened. Then the dehumidifier gave a deeper cough, rattled violently, and roared to life. Somewhere beneath the floor, another motor answered, lower and heavier, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. The water around the drain trembled. A bubble rose between the bars and popped. Okay, I said, exhaling. Good, that's good. My phone rang. I yelped, straightened too fast, and cracked the back of my head against a low beam. Pain flashed white behind my eyes. I dropped the flashlight. It hit the floor, rolled, and threw light crazily across bins and pipes, and the box labeled Bennis School Keep. I grabbed my head. Ow, damn it. The phone kept ringing in my pocket. Owen answered with one hand, blinking hard. Bad time. Why are you whispering? I'm not. You sound like you're calling from inside a wall. I'm in the basement. That's generally where walls go to die. Why? Dehumidifier failed. A pause. In the haunted rich house. It's not haunted. I didn't say haunted. You heard haunted. I picked up the flashlight and checked my fingers for blood. None, but a tender lump was already rising under my hair. The basement drain was backing up. I reset a breaker. You reset a breaker. Owen's voice sharpened. Mara, do you know what you're doing? It was labeled. That is not the same thing. The guide said to do it. The guide also said the hallway grows. I hated that he had a point. I hated more that I needed him to keep talking. The lower pump settled into a steady vibration. Water began to move through the hose in small, pulsing jerks. The crescent around the drain thinned. Listen, I said. Can you come over? He didn't make a joke. That scared me more than the jokes would have. Where are you? Arlington Heights, near the Japanese garden. I'll send the address. I can leave in 10, but my truck S been doing that starter thing. Borrow Kayla's car. She's at work. Owen, I said I'll come. A tiny splash sounded behind me. I turned the flashlight toward the drain. Water had burped up through it again, carrying another ribbon of paper. Then another. Thin strips, wet and pale, sliding up against the grate like something being fed from below. I stepped back. Mara, Owen said, there's paper coming out of the drain. What kind of paper? I don't know, wet paper. That's a clog. Yes, thank you, plumber. I'm serious. Don't put your hand in there. Old drains can have glass, screws, rat crap, whatever. You already what? Nothing. Mara. The kitchen lights above flickered again. This time the basement dimmed too, not because the lights worked, but because the furnace fan sighed down and the pump's vibration faltered. The dehumidifier display blinked. For half a second, every mechanical sound in the basement thinned. Then power returned full. The pump resumed with a hard clunk. On the far side of the basement, near the storage alcove, something toppled off a shelf. A paint can hit the floor with a metallic smack. The sound ricocheted through the room. Figaro screamed upstairs. Not meowed. Screamed. I have to go, I said. No, you do not have to go toward the scary noise. The cat, leave the cat. He needs insulin. So do people, and they manage not to investigate basements during electrical problems. I'm sending the address. Mara, wait. I ended the call and texted him the location with fingers that did not feel fully attached to my hands. Upstairs, Figaro screamed again. I ran. That was the first mistake. Running on old basement stairs with wet soles and a weak flashlight was exactly the sort of thing sensible people warned against. I made it 5 steps before my right foot slipped. My shin slammed into the stair edge, hard enough that sparks of pain ran down to my ankle. I caught the railing with my free hand, twisted my shoulder, and gasped so loudly I startled myself. For a few seconds, I just clung there, sweating, the basement smell thick in my mouth. The cat cried again, thinner this time. I climbed the rest carefully. Figaro was in the kitchen, back arched, staring at the pantry. The pantry door was open, only it did not open onto the pantry. It opened onto the laundry room. Washer, dryer, utility sink, blue detergent bottle, a basket of towels. I knew the laundry room was supposed to be through the mudroom. I had seen it there. I had put my sneakers beside it. The pantry, 5 minutes ago, had contained jars and dry goods and a little step stool. Now the pantry door framed the laundry room under buzzing fluorescent light. I stood at the basement doorway, one hand on the railing, shin throbbing, and remembered Rule 2. If the pantry door opens onto the laundry room, close it and wait 10 minutes. 10 minutes. The dehumidifier needed monitoring. The pump might be failing. Paper was coming up through the drain. Owen was on his way, maybe. Figaro was due for his evening insulin at 8:00 p.m. according to the guide, and the insulin was in the refrigerator behind me. My phone said 7:58. 2 minutes. Figaro, I said carefully. Come here. The cat did not move. His tail was puffed thick as a bottle brush. From the laundry room came a steady drip. Not rain, not pipes. Drip, drip, drip. Then my phone buzzed again. I expected Owen. Instead, it was a WhatsApp message from Helen Voss. For a second, relief weakened my knees. Then I read it. Mara, sorry, just saw your earlier draft typing notification, but no message came through. If you noticed anything unusual, please follow the guide exactly. Don't improvise. Is Figaro with you? Typing notification. I had never sent the message. I had only typed it and deleted nothing. My hands went cold in that very ordinary way they do when adrenaline pulls the warmth inward. No ghosts. No impossible force. Just an app doing something apps sometimes did. Draft indicators, glitches, synced devices, bad assumptions. Explainable. But Helen was awake in Zurich, watching. I typed back, basement dehumidifier failed. Restarted B7. Some water at drain. Pantry door now opens to laundry room. Figaro is in kitchen. His insulin is due in 2 min. The reply came almost immediately. Close pantry. Wait 10. Do not enter laundry from kitchen. Give insulin after. Where are you standing? I looked down. 1 foot still on the basement stair threshold. 1 foot on the kitchen tile. I typed, at basement door. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. From inside the wrong laundry room, the drip stopped. A washing machine beeped once. The sound was soft and electronic, almost polite. Helen's message arrived. Move fully into kitchen. Close basement door. Do it now. I did. The basement door resisted for the first inch, as if air pressure held it open from below. Then it swung shut. Latch clicked. Figaro bolted under the kitchen table. I crossed the tile and reached for the pantry door. My injured shin protested with every step. The fluorescent laundry light flickered inside the wrong doorway, making the detergent bottle pulse blue, white, blue, white. I put my hand on the pantry knob. A voice came from the laundry room. Mara, I froze. It was Owen, not on the phone, not muffled through a speaker. Owen's voice, coming from the laundry room that should not have been there, strained and breathless. Mara, open the door. I'm outside. My phone buzzed at the same time. A text from Owen. Starter's dead. Trying again. Don't do anything stupid. The house made a low settling sound around me, wood compressing, pipes knocking, rain tapping glass in the next room. In the false laundry room, my brother's voice said again, closer this time, Mara, please. It's cold. I shut the pantry door. Not gently. The click sounded enormous. Figaro scrabbled under the table, claws ticking against wood. I backed away until my shoulders hit the refrigerator. The hum of it vibrated through my spine. My phone rang again. Owen's name on the screen, I answered, but I did not speak. Truck S dead, he said, irritated and real and far away, with traffic hissing behind him. I'm calling a rideshare, you okay? I slid down the refrigerator until I was sitting on the floor. Mara, I'm okay, I lied. What happened? I looked at the pantry door. It's green paint. Its brass knob. The tiny shadow line underneath. Nothing I can explain yet. That is a terrible sentence. I know. Do you want me to call 911? No, I said it too quickly. Then I corrected myself. Not yet. There's no break-in, no fire, no injury that matters. And if police show up because a hallway is weird and a pantry is wrong, I lose this job and maybe my mind in front of a patrol officer. You hit your head. A little. Jesus, Mara, I'm fine. You are not fine. The phone buzzed against my cheek. Helen again. 10 minutes. Then insulin. Then check B7 again. If pump stops, you must keep basement water below furnace line until Leonard can walk you through bypass. Do you have another adult present? I almost laughed. It came out wrong. Another adult. As if I wasn't one. As if I hadn't spent half my life being the adult because nobody else could keep track of the stove, the bills, the locks, the moods, the keys in the ignition. I need you here, I told Owen. His voice changed. I'm coming. The kitchen lights flickered once more, longer this time. The refrigerator shut off. The under-cabinet bulbs dimmed to dull orange and died. Outside, rain kept touching the glass. The whole house went quiet except for one sound below the floor, the basement pump grinding, slowing, and then stopping with a wet mechanical cough. My phone screen glowed in my hand. 8:03 p.m. 5 minutes until I could open the pantry safely. Figaro still needed insulin. The basement was taking on water. And from behind the closed pantry door, very softly, someone knocked 3 times. The knocks came again. 3 of them. Polite, patient. The kind of knock you use on a bathroom door when you don't want to embarrass anyone inside. I stayed on the kitchen floor with my back against the dead refrigerator. One hand pressed to my shin, the other clamped around my phone so hard the case creaked. Figaro crouched under the table, only his eyes visible between chair legs. The kitchen had gone dark, except for my phone screen and the gray wash of rainlight from the window over the sink. The pantry door stood 10 feet away on the east wall, basement door behind me on the north wall, living room archway to my left, mudroom and the real laundry room beyond that, through the short hall to my right. I repeated that map in my head because I needed the house to remain a house. 4 exits from the kitchen, 1 table in the middle, 1 cat under it, 1 stupid, injured woman sitting on the floor because she had agreed to 11 days and a decent paycheck. My phone vibrated again. Helen, do not answer knocks. How long since pantry closed? I checked the time. 8:05. 2 minutes. I typed with my thumb. 2 min power out except phone. Pump stopped. Her reply took longer this time. The 3 dots appeared and vanished twice, and each time they disappeared, I felt abandoned in a way I hated myself for feeling. I barely knew this woman. She had handed me keys and cat syringes and an apology about old wiring. Now her messages felt like a rope. Owen was still on the call, quiet but breathing. What's happening? He asked. Someone knocked from the pantry. Someone, something, a sound, I don't know. Get out of the house. I can't. Yes, you can. Front door, shoes. Yet if you can grab him, leave. I looked toward the living room archway. Beyond it, in the front hall, the main door faced the porch and the wet street. It was not far, 30 feet maybe. Kitchen to living room to entry, entry to door. I could picture it perfectly. That made it worse. I leave, the pump stays off, I said. If the basement floods and ruins their furnace, that's on me. It is not on you if their house is doing geometry crimes. Owen, I'm serious. So am I, my voice came out sharper than I meant it to. He exhaled through his nose. that frustrated little sound he made when he wanted to call me stubborn, but knew I would win. Helen's message arrived. Battery lantern in mudroom cabinet. Manual pump handle in same cabinet. After pantry resets, give insulin. Then go to basement with lantern, not phone flashlight. Do not step on standing water near panel. If pump won't restart, use manual bypass at floor drain. Leonard will send diagram. Manual bypass. I closed my eyes. My head throbbed where I had hit the beam. My shin pulsed with my heartbeat. Okay, I said. What okay? There's a lantern in the mudroom. Do not go wandering around. The mudroom is 10 feet away. Mara, every room in that house is apparently lying. He wasn't wrong. The pantry knocked again. This time the sound was not polite. It was louder, the wood jumping in its frame. Figaro hissed so hard it became a cough. I flinched, and my knee hit the cabinet behind me. The pantry knob turned, not all the way, a little, metal squeaking against metal. I crawled forward, staying low, and reached under the table. Figaro retreated from my hand, claws clicking against the floor. Come on, I whispered. Please don't be a cat right now. He bared his teeth. The knob stopped moving. 8 minutes. 9. 10. At 8:13, the kitchen lights flickered once, just enough to show the room in a yellow blink. The refrigerator gave a heavy shudder and hummed back to life. The microwave clock flashed 12:00. The under-cabinet bulbs came on one by one. I stood too fast, and dizziness washed over me. The countertop tipped. The floor dipped. I grabbed the sink edge and waited, breathing through my mouth until the room leveled out. You there? Owen asked. Power's back. Leave. Lantern first. Mara, I'm putting you on speaker. Absolutely do not. I put him on speaker and set the phone on the counter. The pantry door looked normal, just a green door with a brass knob. No knocks, no voice, no light underneath except the warm kitchen glow. I crossed to it and opened it fast because hesitation was worse. Shelves, jars, flour, lentils, rice. A step stool. The pantry was a pantry again. My relief made me stupid. I laughed once, breathless. It reset. Then the bottom shelf collapsed. A glass jar of chickpeas dropped and shattered at my feet. Dry beans bounced across the tile like hail. Figaro shot from under the table, skidded through them, and vanished into the living room. Damn it. Owen's voice crackled from the counter. What broke? Jar, it's fine. It wasn't fine. There was glass everywhere, and my sock had a dark, wet spot at the toe because I had managed to cut myself through the thin fabric. Not deep, but enough to sting with a clean, mean bite. First attempt, wait out the pantry and restore normal access. Partial success. Pantry returned. Cat fled. Foot cut. Pump still dead. I hobbled to the refrigerator, took out Figaro's insulin, and checked the dosage 3 times under the kitchen light. My hands trembled. The syringe looked too small to matter and too sharp to trust. I found Figaro in the living room behind a wingback chair, crouched beneath a framed map of old streetcar lines. He growled when I reached for him. Buddy, I said, trying to keep my voice soft. I know, I agree. Worst hotel ever. I wrapped him in a dish towel after 2 failed attempts and 1 scratch across my wrist. He fought like an animal with no interest in teamwork. The needle went in. He jerked. I nearly pulled it out too soon, but the plunger depressed and the dose went through. There, I whispered. He bolted again, insulted but alive. I leaned against the chair and let my forehead rest on the upholstery. It smelled faintly of dust and old wool. My whole body had started to shake, delayed and embarrassing. From the kitchen, Owen said, small through the phone speaker, "You still with me?" "Yeah, you're breathing weird." I gave the cat insulin. "Great. Cat's handled. Now leave." "I have to restart the pump." "No, you have to stop being everyone's emergency contact." That landed where he meant it to. I stood up. "Don't." Someone leaves you instructions, and suddenly you're responsible for their basement, their cat, their impossible hallway. I said, "Don't. You always do this." I went back to the kitchen, stepping around glass and chickpeas. "Do what?" "Make it your job to hold the roof up." The roof is currently metaphorical and possibly leaking. I'm not joking. I know you're not. The problem was, neither was I if I left, and something happened. Fire, flood, the cat, the house collapsing around some hidden structural failure. Then the whole story would become one more example of me not checking the right thing at the right time. My private fear had a very simple shape. I believed consequences, waited for the moment. I stepped away. Helen sent a photo. It was a diagram Leonard had marked up, showing the basement from above. Stairs came down along the kitchen wall, electrical panel on the west wall, furnace and dehumidifier in the middle, floor drain near the storage shelves, a dotted line from the drain to a square labeled bypass valve under grate, a red warning near the far alcove, lower access cover, do not load, do not open. Below the photo, Helen wrote, "If water reaches furnace base, insurance and fire risk become serious. Manual bypass requires removing drain grate. Use gloves. Keep phone dry. Second attempt, manual bypass." I got the lantern from the mudroom cabinet. It sat behind shoe polish, a stack of microfiber cloths, and a raccoon trap instruction sheet. Beside it was a metal T-shaped handle wrapped in cloth, heavier than it looked. I also found rubber gloves and a knee pad for gardening. The real laundry room was visible through the mudroom doorway. Washer on left, dryer on right, utility sink at the back, blue detergent bottle on shelf. Normal. I stared at it too long. From the phone on speaker, Owen said, "What? Laundry room is where it should be." "Good, don't go in." "I'm not. Your definition of not doing things has been flexible tonight." I carried everything to the basement door and opened it. The smell came up first, wet concrete, hot dust from the furnace, and something sour, like paper left in a sink. The lantern was brighter than the flashlight, throwing a wide circle down the stairs. Water reflected at the bottom. Not inches, not yet, but more than before. The lowest third of the basement floor shone with a thin sheet spreading from the drain. It had reached the base of the storage shelves. The pump sat silent. The dehumidifier display was dark. I stepped down carefully, one hand on the rail. My cut foot stung in my damp sock. My shins screamed with every stair. At the bottom, I stopped and checked the map. Panel west wall. Do not step in water near it. The water was still 5 or 6 feet from the panel, but it had a way of making distance feel negotiable. The furnace base was dry for now. The drain was not. Wet paper strips had gathered in a pale nest over the grate. I put on the gloves and crouched. The first misdirection came when I lifted the paper. Hair. That was what it looked like in the lantern beam. A wet clump of dark hair threaded through the grate, slick and human-looking. I made a sound I do not want to describe. "What?" Owen shouted from the phone in my pocket, tinny and distorted. I scrambled backwards so fast my heel slipped. My palms slapped wet concrete. Pain shot up my wrist. The clump came with me, stuck to the glove. I shook it off, gagging. Then I saw the label. Not hair, magnetic tape. Black-brown strips of old cassette or VHS tape, unspooling from the drain, tangled with pulped paper and grit. The kind of thing that looks biological until your brain catches up. I laughed then, but it was not a good laugh. "It's tape," I said, breathless. "It's just tape. Why is there tape in the drain?" Adding that to the list, I pulled the rest free. The drain grate was held by 2 screws, both rusted but movable with the little tool clipped to the T-handle. My head pounded when I bent over. Water seeped through one glove at the wrist and ran cold down my sleeve. First screw came loose. Second stuck. I pushed. The screwdriver slipped and tore a crescent of skin off my knuckle inside the glove. I swore so loudly the sound bounced off the basement walls. The screw gave. I lifted the grate. The smell intensified. Mud, rot, old paper. Under the grate, the bypass valve looked like Leonard's diagram. A square metal socket recessed in the drain wall. I fit the T-handle into it and turned. Nothing. I tried the other direction. Nothing. I put both hands on the handle and leaned my weight into it. My shoulder burned where I had twisted it on the stairs. The valve moved 1 inch with a shriek of metal, then stopped. Below me, water began to rise through the open drain, not in a gush, but in a steady, swelling pulse. Brownish water carrying flecks of paper and tape. It spread over my shoes. No, no, no. I pulled the handle back. It did not come loose. The bypass was jammed half open or half closed. Some state worse than either. Second attempt, manual bypass. Failed. New fact, something in the drain line was full of paper and magnetic tape. Trap tightening. Water now rising faster. Tool stuck, grate removed. My phone rang in my pocket. I almost dropped the handle reaching for it. Not Owen. Unknown number. I answered because panic makes every option look like a door. "Hello," a man's voice said. "This is Portland General Electric Automated Outage Line. We're calling about a reported service interruption at," I nearly cried with relief. A real institution. A normal problem. Wires, transformers, service areas. Yes, I have intermittent power at," the recording continued without hearing me. "Your area. Crews are assessing damage. Estimated restoration time is currently unknown." Then it disconnected. "PGE?" Owen asked. "Automated outage call. Great, see. Normal storm outage. Leave the house." Power came back. And may go again. The basement lights flickered overhead, though they had never properly come on. For 1 impossible second, every dark bulb glowed dim red, like heat behind paper. Then they died again. I looked toward the stairs. The path was clear. I could go up. I could get my bag. I could put Figaro in his carrier if I could catch him. Front door, street, rain, a neighbor's porch. Owen could meet me there. That was when a car pulled into the driveway. Headlights swept across the basement windows, 2 narrow rectangles high on the wall, near the ceiling. White light slid over storage bins, paint cans, my wet shoes, the open drain. Tires crunched on gravel outside. "Owen," I said into the phone, "I'm still waiting for the ride." The headlights clicked off. A car door opened, closed. Footsteps crossed the gravel path along the side of the house, heading toward the back. For a moment, all I could hear was rain. Then someone tried the mudroom door. The knob rattled hard. I turned off the lantern by instinct, plunging the basement into near darkness. except for the thin gray light from the high windows. "Mara," Owen whispered, though there was no reason for him to whisper. "Someone's here. Hide." The mudroom door rattled again. A low male voice cursed outside. Not Leonard, not Owen. My chest compressed until breathing felt like drinking through a straw. A human threat then. Real. Grounded. Awful in a way the impossible hallway was not. Someone had come to the house during a storm outage. Someone knew the Vosses were away. The guide had said not to call emergency services unless structural damage was visible. The guide did not say what to do about burglars. I moved toward the stairs slowly, keeping one hand on the wall. Water covered the toes of my sneakers now. The T-handle remained stuck in the open drain behind me. Above, the mudroom door stopped rattling. Glass broke. A small sound. Not a window shattering dramatically. More like a pane cracking under pressure, followed by a dull clink of pieces falling into a sink or onto tile. Owen said, "Call 911. This time I did not argue. I climbed the stairs, one step at a time, lantern off, phone slick in my hand. My injured shin trembled. My cut foot made wet prints. Halfway up, the basement pump suddenly kicked on below me with a violent grinding roar. I flinched, missed a step, and slammed my knee into wood. The roar became a scream. Mechanical, not human, bearings seizing. A motor chewing itself apart. Then silence. A burnt electrical smell rose from the basement. The kitchen above was dark again. At the top of the stairs, I crouched and looked through the crack between door and frame. The mudroom lay to the right, partly visible past the pantry wall. The real laundry room beyond it was dark. Rain blew in somewhere. I could hear it hitting the floor. A flashlight beam cut across the mudroom. A man stepped inside. Hood up. Dark rain jacket. Backpack. Gloves. He was not huge, not a monster, just a person, which was worse because people could choose things. He moved quickly but not smoothly, like he had been here before and was still afraid of being caught. I dialed 911 without taking my eyes off him. The call failed. No signal. I stared at the screen. One bar, then none. The man whispered, come on," and opened the mudroom cabinet. The same cabinet where I had found the lantern and handle. He was looking for something. My phone buzzed with a delayed message from Helen. If an unknown person comes to the house, do not let them reach the study. I read it once, twice. The man turned from the cabinet, empty-handed, and aimed his flashlight toward the kitchen. I ducked back behind the basement door. My breathing sounded too loud. My skin felt too tight for my body. Owen's voice came through the phone, breaking up. "Mara, Mara." The man entered the kitchen. His boots crunched on chickpeas and glass. He stopped. I could see his shadow under the door. He had noticed. Of course he had noticed. The broken jar, the open basement door, the fact that someone was inside. "Maribel," he called softly. My stomach dropped, not because it was a strange voice, because he knew my name. He took one step closer to the basement door. From the living room, Figaro knocked something over. A lamp, maybe. The crash cracked through the house. The man spun toward it. I moved. Not bravely. Not with a plan. I shoved the basement door open into the kitchen, grabbed the nearest thing on the counter, the heavy glass sugar jar, and threw it at him. It missed his head by 6 inches and exploded against the cabinet. He shouted and stumbled back. I ran left, through the kitchen archway into the living room, toward the front hall. Clear geography. Kitchen to living room to entry, entry to front door. I could see the door. I could see the wet porch through its little square window. 20 feet. Behind me, the man yelled, "Wait, I'm not." The house lights went out completely. Not flicker, not dim. Out, in the dark. I hit the edge of the coffee table with my thigh and went down hard. My phone flew from my hand and skidded under the sofa, still lit, Owen's voice shouting from it. The front door was a pale rectangle ahead. I crawled toward it, dragging my bad leg. 10 feet. 7. Then the floor tilted. Not metaphorically. The living room floor gave a low wooden groan, and my body slid sideways against the rug. Books thumped off shelves. Somewhere behind the walls, pipes hammered in rapid bursts. The house had not become impossible in a grand way. It had shifted like a failing structure. An old hillside house after too much water. A foundation moving. A floor losing level. Physics, but physics going wrong all at once. I reached the entry. The front door handle was right there. I grabbed it and pulled. It opened 3 inches and stopped against something solid outside. A fallen branch, a shifted porch rail, the swollen frame. I put my shoulder into it. Pain flared down my arm. It did not move. Behind me, the man's flashlight swept the living room. "Mara, stop," he shouted. "The porch is gone." I froze with my hand on the door. Rain blew through the 3-inch gap, cold and sharp. Through it I saw no porch boards, no steps, just a dark drop where the porch should have been, and below that, water moving over the slope in muddy sheets. The hill had given way. The front exit was not an exit anymore. Behind me, in the basement, something cracked deep and loud. The whole house lurched an inch downhill. The front door slammed shut by itself, trapping my fingers between wood and frame for one bright, unbearable second before I tore them free. I screamed then. Couldn't help it. The man's flashlight found me. His hood had fallen back. He was maybe 30, pale, soaked, terrified. "My name is Daniel Price," he said, breathing hard. "I worked for Leonard. We need to get to the study before the lower access opens." The living room floor groaned again. My phone, still under the sofa, crackled with Owen's broken voice. "Mara, answer me." Behind Daniel, through the kitchen, basement water began spilling over the top stair. Retreat was gone. The front porch had collapsed. The basement was flooding upward. And the only person who seemed to know more than I did had broken into the house. Daniel lifted both hands, palms open, flashlight shaking. "Please," he said, "if that guide told you to stay out of the study, it lied." And somewhere beyond the closed pocket door, the northeast study window rattled hard in its frame, as if struck by weather from the wrong side. Daniel Price kept his hands up until I could see they were empty. That was the only reason I did not throw something else at him. That, and the fact that my right hand was already swelling from the front door, slamming on it. My fingers looked wrong in the beam of his flashlight, red at the knuckles, pale at the tips, shaking like they belonged to someone much older. Behind Daniel, the kitchen floor reflected water. Not a lot yet. Enough. It had reached the top basement stair and was spreading over the tile in a thin sheet, carrying chickpeas, glass dust, and little black-brown ribbons of magnetic tape. The refrigerator hummed, died, hummed again. Every electrical sound in the house had become untrustworthy. "Stay there," I said. Daniel nodded too fast. Okay, but we don't have time. You broke in. The mudroom pain. I know. You know my name. Helen sent it to Leonard. Leonard sent it to me before their flight. case you called. That is not making me feel better. I worked on the retrofit. He pointed toward the floor, then seemed to think better of moving his hands and lifted them again. The foundation retrofit, the drainage. The house groaned, not a creak. A low structural complaint that moved through the floorboards into my knees. A bookshelf tilted in the living room shuddered and threw 3 hardbacks onto the rug. Figaro shot from behind the wingback chair and darted toward the kitchen, then stopped when he saw the water. Daniel swore under his breath. The lower access, I asked. His face changed when I said it, so it was real. What is it? A service void under the original foundation, he said. Old cistern, old retaining wall, drainage channel, whatever they called it in 1910. Leonard built sensors and bypass systems because the hill moves water under the house during heavy storms. The guide is supposed to keep you from making the pressure changes worse. Pressure changes, doors, windows, loads on weak points, air pressure, water pressure, the structure twisting. It makes rooms look, he stopped, searching for a word. Wrong. Wrong was not an engineering term, but I understood it. The study window rattled again. Once, hard, I looked toward the pocket door. That window shows snow. It doesn't show outside. Daniel's voice was strained. It's part of the monitoring system. Leonard put a thermal panel and camera relay in there because the northeast corner is where the retaining wall fails first. Snow means surface temperature dropped behind the wall. Water's moving through the void. Cold groundwater. Why not just say that? Because Leonard doesn't say things if he can make a binder instead. That sounded so much like him, it almost steadied me. Almost. My phone crackled under the sofa, Owen's voice breaking in and out. Mara, answer. Daniel glanced toward it. Is that someone outside? My brother, he's on his way. He can't come up the front. Road edge is sliding. I barely got the car in before the driveway dropped behind me. The kitchen lights flickered. Water touched the leg of the table and split around it. I took one step toward my phone. Daniel said, "Don't." I froze. Why? The living room floor's tipping toward the front wall. If the porch is gone, that section may not be carrying right. You want me to leave my phone? I want you alive enough to be mad about it. That was the first thing he said that did not sound rehearsed. Helen's WhatsApp notification flashed on the phone screen under the sofa, too far away to read. She told me not to let you reach the study, I said. Daniel's mouth tightened. Helen thinks I caused what happened to Ben. The name hit the room like a physical thing. Ben's school box in the basement. The boy in 3 photographs, and then none. What happened? Not now. Yes, now. The house shuddered again. This time the motion came with a wet cracking sound from below the kitchen, like a plank splitting underwater. Daniel's control slipped. He opened the lower access during a test. Leonard told him not to. I was in the study logging sensor readings. Helen was upstairs. The house shifted, the basement door jammed, and Ben was trapped in the storage alcove when the sump failed. We got him out, but too late. That's why the guide sounds insane. That's why Helen doesn't trust anyone to improvise. My anger had nowhere to go. For a moment, there was only rain, water, and Owen's distant voice trapped under furniture. Then Figaro stepped into the kitchen water. The old cat lifted one paw, disgusted, and tried to retreat. His back legs slid on chickpeas. He panicked, skittered sideways, and knocked against the basement door, which was still open. Below, the stuck pump gave a grinding cough. Daniel's eyes snapped to the door. Did you remove the drain grate? Yes, Is the T-handle in the bypass? Yes. Still in? Yes. He closed his eyes once briefly. That's why the pump seized. The bypass is half open. It's pulling debris back against the impeller. You told me to get to the study. We need the study to kill power to the pump and open the retaining wall vent before the lower access cover lifts. Then we manually free the valve. We, you and me, he swallowed. Unless you have another adult present. I laughed once. It hurt my throat. The phrase came from Helen. Another adult. I had spent the whole night trying to be the responsible person inside someone else's disaster. Now responsibility had become a trap with water in it. What's in the study? I asked. Control board behind Leonard's bridge model. Manual override. It can vent the wall and shut B7 without touching the panel. And Helen said not to let you reach it. Because if I'm wrong, opening that vent could speed the slide. If you're wrong, if I'm wrong, we leave through the back before the house drops another foot. The back where? Greenhouse. Mudroom to greenhouse path. There's a retaining stair behind it. Your car, blocked. The kitchen water lapped another inch forward. We did not have a good choice. Only different shapes of bad. That was when Owen's voice came clear through the phone, loud enough to reach both of us. Mara, I'm outside. I'm on the road below. I can see the house. I moved before Daniel could stop me. I dropped to my knees by the sofa, keeping my weight back from the tilted front wall, and swept my left hand underneath. My crushed right hand screamed when I bumped it against the rug. My fingers found dust, a cat toy, the phone. I dragged it out. Owen, Mara, the porch is gone. There's water running under the foundation. Who is in there with you? Daniel Price. He says he worked for Leonard. Daniel leaned closer. Tell him to stay off the slope. Stay off the slope, I repeated. I'm not coming up the slope, Owen said, which meant he had considered it. Fire S on the way. I had signaled down here, but dispatch said landslide response could take time. You need to get to the back. The front hill is peeling away. Fire was on the way. Not here, not yet. But real people had been called. That mattered. It gave the world edges again. Back exit, I said. We're trying. Owen's voice broke. Mara, listen to me. Do not stay for the house. I looked at the kitchen water. At Figaro, now crouched on a dining chair. At the binder lying open on the counter, its pages beginning to curl from damp air. I'm not, I said, and I wanted it to be true. The study window rattled a third time. Daniel said, now, we moved. Living room first. Daniel went ahead, testing the floorboards with his boot before putting weight down. He was not graceful. He was scared and limping slightly, favoring his left side, but he knew where to step. Along the interior wall, away from the front, around the fallen books, past the wingback chair. I followed with the lantern in my left hand, phone shoved into my hoodie pocket, right hand tucked against my chest. My cut foot slid in my shoe. My shin throbbed. My head had begun to pulse in time with the rain. Figaro watched from the chair. I stopped. Daniel turned. No, I'm not leaving him. We need the study. He dies if the house goes. Daniel looked like he might argue. Then he saw my face and did not. 10 seconds. I grabbed the dish towel from the kitchen chair, took 2 slow steps toward Figaro, and got bitten immediately. His teeth sank into the pad below my thumb. Pain went bright and sharp. I wrapped him anyway, clumsy and one-handed, trapping his legs against his body. He made a sound like a rusty hinge being murdered. Sorry, I whispered. Sorry, sorry. We reached the pocket door. Daniel slid it open. The study was colder than before. Not emotionally colder. Actually colder. the kind that raised goosebumps under wet sleeves. The banker's lamp was off now, but the northeast window glowed with reflected white. Snow still moved beyond it, thick flakes falling sideways. Frost had formed along the inside edge of the glass in a thin, glittering seam. Daniel crossed to the desk and shoved aside mail. Lamp. I set the lantern down, still holding Figaro against my ribs. He squirmed, claws digging through towel and shirt. Daniel grabbed Leonard's bridge model, a delicate steel suspension bridge mounted on a wooden base. For one strange second, I thought he was stealing it. Then he twisted one of the towers. A latch clicked. The wall panel behind the desk opened half an inch. Of course, Leonard Voss had hidden an emergency control board behind a miniature bridge. Engineers did have a sense of humor. It just came out as evidence. Inside the panel were switches, labels, indicator lights, and a small analog gauge marked void pressure. The needle trembled in the red. Daniel flipped a clear cover up. A printed warning underneath read, "Open northeast vent only if lower access buoyancy exceeds safe range. Verify basement visually." "We visually verified enough?" I asked. "No." He put one finger on the switch. "But the basement is coming up the stairs." The house lurched. The study door slid partly closed behind us, then slammed open again as the frame shifted. The window gave a loud crack, not breaking, flexing. The frost line widened. Daniel flipped the switch. For half a second, nothing happened. Then a deep metallic boom sounded from under the house, followed by a rush of water so loud it seemed to fill the walls. The study window went black. The snow vanished. For one breathless moment, it reflected us. Daniel at the panel, soaked and pale, me holding a furious cat. The room tilted just enough to make the desk drawers slide open. The gauge needle dropped out of the red. Daniel exhaled. Good. Then the panel sparked. A white snap. A smell like burning plastic. Daniel jerked back, clutching his hand. Damn it, the lights on the board died. The pump in the basement started again. Not a normal start. A violent, choking roar that shook the floor. Daniel's face went slack with fear. It didn't shut B7, so shut it from here. I can't. Board's gone. The floor under the desk bucked upward. Figaro exploded out of the towel. He clawed my shoulder, launched himself to the floor, and vanished behind the bookcase. I cried out and nearly dropped the lantern. From below came a heavy bang, then another. Daniel whispered, "Covers lifting. The lower access." We ran back to the kitchen. No argument, no plan, just movement. Water had spread across the kitchen, fully now, thin, but fast, flowing from the basement door in pulsing waves. The basement stairs were no longer stairs. They were a dark chute with water sliding over them. The pump shrieked below. Daniel grabbed my arm before I stepped down. "We have to kill power at the panel. It's in water. Panels above water. Floor near it isn't safe. But if B7 stays on, the pump burns and trips the whole house or starts a fire. Can we use the breaker from here?" "No, then what?" He looked at the pantry. Wooden step stool, rubber gloves, dry board from shelves if we can reach one. That's insane. That's electricity. We made our third attempt because the alternative was burning inside a sliding house. Daniel took the pantry step stool and a wooden cutting board from beside the stove. I found dry rubber gloves in the mudroom cabinet and wrapped my bitten hand in a towel. Owen was shouting through my phone again, telling me not to touch anything electrical. I put him on speaker on the counter because I could not carry him and survive the stairs. "Mara," he said, voice breaking, "please do not go down there." "I have to." "No, you don't." For once, I had no answer that made me sound sane. Daniel went first, placing the cutting board on the wet stair like a temporary foothold, then the stool, then stepping down to the next exposed tread. The water was ankle deep at the bottom, moving around his boots. He braced one hand against the wall. "Panel side is still mostly dry," he said, but his voice did not believe it. I followed halfway down with the lantern, keeping it high. The basement had changed. Shelves leaned. Bins floated. The box labeled Benna School Keep had fallen open, spilling notebooks sealed in plastic bags. Magnetic tape streamed from the drain like black weeds. The T-handle still stuck out of the open grate, shuddering with each pulse from the pump. Beyond the storage alcove, the lower access cover lifted and dropped. A square metal hatch in the floor. Bang. Water welled around its edges. Bang. Each lift higher. Daniel reached the panel. He stood on the wooden stool, one gloved hand on a dry joist, and opened the metal door. The pump screamed. "B7, I shouted. "I see it." The hatch banged again. This time it did not settle fully. Something under it had pressure. Water, air, mud, the hill itself trying to come inside. Daniel flipped the breaker. The pump stopped. The sudden quiet hit harder than noise. For 3 seconds, the house held still. Then the hatch flew open. Not all the way, 6 inches. Enough for brown water to erupt through it in a thick upward surge, carrying mud, sticks, and a slap of cold air that smelled like earth torn open. Daniel slipped off the stool. I dropped the lantern. It hit the stair, rolled, and stayed lit sideways, throwing the basement into a tilted, nightmare version of itself. Daniel landed in the water with a splash and slammed his shoulder against the furnace base. The stool floated away. The breaker panel hung open above him. I went down 2 steps before remembering electricity, then stopped, helpless, furious. "Get up." "I can't." He tried and failed. Shoulder. The hatch banged wider. The whole basement floor seemed to lift around it. Improvisation is not heroic. It is ugly and usually late. I grabbed the basement doorstop from the top stair, a solid wedge of old rubber, and shoved it into my hoodie pocket. Then I stepped into the water. My feet went numb instantly. Daniel grabbed the stair rail with his good arm. I caught the back of his jacket and pulled. Pain lit up my crushed fingers so badly I gagged, but he moved one foot, then another. We got him to the stairs. The hatch slammed open to nearly a foot. A metal chain attached to it strained against the floor. "Close it," Daniel gasped. "With what?" "The T-handle, turn it back. Release the pressure." Of course. The tool I had jammed. I waded to the drain. Water pushed at my shins. The lantern beam flickered across floating tape and wet paper. My gloves filled with cold water. I gripped the T-handle. It did not move. I put my weight into it. Nothing. The hatch banged again. The chain screamed. I thought of Ben's school box, of Helen writing rules instead of explanations, of Leonard labeling every danger except grief, of my mother's stove, my father's keys, all the little disasters I had tried to prevent by checking twice. I had measured the hallway twice. I had improvised. I had made things worse. Then Owen's voice came down from the kitchen, faint and frantic. "Mara, fire S here. They're below the house. They need you at the back if you can move." The back. Greenhouse. Mudroom. Retaining stair. Not the basement. not the study, not the hatch. I looked at the T-handle in my hands and understood the choice. We could not save the house. We could only keep it standing long enough to get out. I pulled the rubber doorstop from my pocket and jammed it beneath the raised edge of the lower access hatch near the chain hinge. Not to close it, to keep it from slamming fully open and snapping the chain. Daniel saw what I was doing and crawled down one step, face gray with pain. "Temporary," he said. "I know. Maybe 30 seconds. Then move." We moved, up the stairs, through the kitchen water. Daniel half collapsed against the counter, shoulder hanging wrong. I grabbed the phone with my left hand. "Back exit," I told Owen. "Go." Figaro appeared on the kitchen table, soaked to the knees, eyes huge. "No," Daniel said. I grabbed the cat. He did not fight this time. That scared me more than the fighting had. Mudroom. Real laundry room to the left, dark and wet from the broken pane. Cabinet open. Glass on floor. Greenhouse door ahead, beyond a narrow covered passage. The passage had shifted. The floorboards sloped toward the hillside. Rain blew through a crack in the roof. Greenhouse beyond glimmered with wet glass and plant silhouettes. Behind us, the lower access hatch tore free. The sound was huge and blunt, metal ripping from concrete, followed by water hammering up through the basement with enough force to shake the kitchen cabinets open. Dishes fell and shattered. The house dipped downhill. Daniel fell to one knee. I grabbed the back of his jacket with my bitten hand and screamed not words, just sound. He got up. We staggered into the greenhouse. Warm, damp air hit us. The smell of soil and tomato vines and orchids. Hundreds of hanging pots swayed from their hooks, leaves brushing my face. The floor was brick, slick with moss. At the far end, an exterior door led to the retaining stair. It was bolted. Of course it was bolted. Daniel fumbled with it one-handed. His injured shoulder made him slow. Too slow. The house behind us cracked again. I set Figaro on a potting bench, grabbed a steel trowel, and smashed the bolt housing until the cheap screws tore out of the swollen wood. Once, twice, 3 times, the trowel bent. The 4th hit broke the plate free. The door flew open. Cold rain slapped my face. Outside, flashlights moved below the slope. Real voices shouted. Firefighters. Owen shouting my name. A siren wailed somewhere down the road, muffled by trees and rain. The retaining stair was narrow, concrete, slick with mud, running down along the side of the greenhouse to a lower service path. Half of it was covered in runoff. Part of the railing had pulled loose. Daniel looked back at the house. I did too. Through the greenhouse passage, I could see the kitchen lights flicker back on. Warm and domestic and absurd. The binder sat on the counter in rising water, pages spread like wings. Then the 2nd floor hallway window above us cracked, and a line of glass rained down onto the passage roof. We went down. Daniel first, because if he fell, I could not carry him, but I could at least know where. I followed with Figaro clutched under one arm, my other hand scraping along the wet wall. My crushed fingers had stopped hurting and gone numb. That seemed bad. My shin no longer felt like part of me. Halfway down, Daniel slipped. He slid 3 steps, hit the loose railing, and nearly went over. I grabbed his jacket. Figaro yowled. My shoulder tore with pain. Daniel caught the broken rail with his good hand and hung there, boots kicking mud. Below, Owen shouted, "Hold on." A firefighter's light swung up toward us. Daniel looked back at me, eyes wide, face streaked with rain and dirt. "I can't." "Yes, you can," I said, because there was no room for anything gentler. He got one knee under him. I pulled. The firefighter reached him from below at the same time Owen reached the bottom of the stairs. No helmet, no coat, just my brother in a soaked hoodie being held back by another responder. Daniel was taken by the arms and hauled down. Then hands were reaching for me. "Cat first," I said. Someone took Figaro. I took one more step. Behind me, the Voss house gave a long, splintering sigh. Not a collapse, not fully, but a settling, a surrender. The greenhouse passage folded inward with a crash of glass and wet wood, cutting off the route we had just used. Soil spilled across the top of the stairs. Orchid pots burst on the concrete, scattering bark chips and white petals into the rain. Owen grabbed me at the bottom and held on too hard. I would have complained if I could breathe. Above us, the house sat crooked against the hill, lights flickering in rooms that no longer lined up the way they should. The northeast study window was dark now. Just glass. Just rain. No snow. A firefighter asked me questions. Name, injuries. Anyone else inside? I answered badly, in pieces. Mara Bell, hand, head, cat, Daniel, no one else. Owen kept saying my name into my wet hair like he was counting me. Daniel sat on the service path with a responder holding his shoulder in place. He looked up at the house, and in his face I saw no victory, only recognition. The conflict had resolved in the bluntest way possible. We had not fixed the house. We had escaped it. And from inside, faint beneath the rain and the shouts and the radio chatter, came one last ordinary sound, the microwave clock beeping, patiently asking someone to set the time. The first official question anyone asked me was whether I knew what day it was. I remember thinking it was a stupid question, then feeling guilty because the firefighter asking it looked about 19 and had mud up to his elbows. His helmet lamp shone too brightly in my face. Rain ran off the brim and dripped onto his turnout coat. "Thursday," I said. He glanced at Owen. Owen had one arm around my shoulders and one hand gripping my sleeve, like I might get embarrassed and walk back into the house if he loosened his hold. His face was wet, but not just from rain. He kept looking over my head at the slope, then back at me, then down at my hand. "Date?" the firefighter asked. I stared at him. The date had been written on the guide, on the weather alert, on the discharge paperwork I would later sign. But right then, it floated away from me like something dropped into deep water. "October," I said. "Good enough for now." It was not good enough. Nothing was. They moved us down the service path behind the greenhouse and toward the lower road, where emergency vehicles had gathered with their lights flashing silently through the trees. The sirens had stopped by then. Radios clicked. Boots scraped gravel. Somewhere below, a chainsaw coughed to life, and then cut off again when someone shouted that the slope was still moving. The house sat above us at a slight angle, not cartoonishly tilted, not ruined in the clean way you see in disaster photos. It looked almost normal if you didn't know where the porch had been. Warm kitchen light shone through a wet window. The upstairs hallway window was cracked. The greenhouse passage had folded in on itself, and through that jagged gap, I could see hanging plants swaying in the... That was the worst part. How domestic it still looked. A place could be trying to kill you and still have under-cabinet lighting. Figaro was wrapped in a silver emergency blanket in the back of an ambulance, furious but alive. A paramedic had checked his insulin timing with the seriousness of a battlefield medic. He gave me one thin, irritated meow when I leaned in to see him, then turned his face away as if the entire event had been my fault. Daniel Price sat on the bumper of the second ambulance with his left arm strapped against his chest. His shoulder was dislocated. His right hand was burned across 2 fingers from the control panel spark. He looked smaller without the hood, soaked hair plastered to his forehead, a streak of mud cutting across one cheek. When a police officer asked him why he had broken into the house, Daniel gave the same answer 3 times. I believed there was an imminent structural failure. The officer, a woman named Sergeant Alicia Mercer, 41 female, had the careful patience of someone who had heard every kind of lie and most kinds of panic. She wrote in a notebook under a plastic rain cover and asked, "And you believed this because I worked on the retrofit. When, 2 years ago, were you authorized to enter tonight? No. Did you know the homeowners were out of the country? Yes." That made everyone look up. Daniel closed his eyes. Leonard Voss contacted me before their trip. He said if the house sitter reported a window discrepancy, I should come. I was sitting under a blanket nearby while a paramedic cleaned the bite on my hand. At that, I turned so fast the paramedic told me not to move. "Leonard called you," I said. Daniel opened his eyes, but did not quite meet mine. "Texted days ago. Helen told me not to let you reach the study." "I know." "Why?" He swallowed. Rain hit the ambulance roof in a hard, steady hiss. "Because Leonard thinks in systems," Daniel said. "Helen thinks in funerals." No one spoke for a second. Sergeant Mercer's pen paused. Then it moved again. I was taken to Legacy Good Samaritan Medical Center because my fingers had swollen into something purple and useless. My head hurt when I looked sideways, and my right shin had a raised bruise the size of a pear. Owen rode with me even though he wasn't family in the legal sense that mattered to the ambulance crew until I said, "He's my brother," with enough force that nobody argued. At the hospital, the night became fluorescent. That is how I remember it. Fluorescent lights, white blankets, the smell of disinfectant and wet clothes. A nurse named Caitlin, 36, female, cut off the sleeve of my hoodie because dried mud had stiffened the cuff around my injured wrist. She apologized before she did it, which made me want to cry more than the pain. My fingers were not broken, just badly crushed. My hand had soft tissue trauma, a cat bite, and 2 torn nails. My shin was bruised but intact. My head injury was a mild concussion. They cleaned the bite, gave me antibiotics, put my hand in a splint, and told Owen to wake me every few hours if I slept. "Any nausea?" Caitlin asked. "Yes," I said. "From the head injury or the night?" I looked at her. She gave a tired little smile. "Will mark possible concussion related." Owen stayed beside the bed, one knee bouncing, hands clasped between his thighs. He had always been bad in hospitals. Too many machines, too many people speaking softly. When our father had his first heart scare, Owen had disappeared to the vending machines for 40 minutes and come back with 6 bags of pretzels and no change. Now he did not leave. "You should have left," he said eventually. "I know. You always say that after." "I know." His jaw moved. He was trying not to be angry because I was injured, and that made him angrier. "I heard you screaming and I couldn't get up the hill. Do you get that? I could see the house, but I couldn't get to you. I'm sorry." "I don't want sorry. What do you want?" He rubbed both hands over his face. His hoodie was still damp at the shoulders. I want you to believe there are emergencies that are not yours to fix. The room hummed around us. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled over a threshold. I wanted to defend myself. Say Figaro was there. Say the pump mattered. Say the guide made it feel like every wrong step would hurt someone. All of that was true. None of it was the answer he needed. I'm trying, I said. He nodded, but he looked away. Helen and Leonard Voss returned to Portland the next afternoon. Not because the conference ended, because photographs of their house had already reached the local news, and because the police had questions that could not be answered over WhatsApp. I did not see them until 2 days later, when Sergeant Mercer asked me to come in for a follow-up statement. Owen drove me because my hand was splinted, and because he had appointed himself temporary guardian of all my bad ideas. The meeting happened in a small room at a Portland Police Bureau office that smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. Helen sat on one side of the table, Leonard beside her. They looked smaller than they had during the house tour. Not guilty small, exactly. More like people who had spent years tightening themselves around one terrible event and had finally run out of room. Helen's hair was pulled back too tightly. Leonard had not shaved. Maribel, 27, female, sat across from them with one hand wrapped, one shin bruised, and a private certainty that no amount of paperwork would make the Voss house ordinary again. Owen Bell, 22, male, waited in the lobby because Sergeant Mercer said witnesses had to be separated, and because he had muttered, I might say something unhelpful, in a tone that suggested accuracy. Daniel was not there. He had given his statement separately. Sergeant Mercer turned on a recorder and asked us to go over the timeline. It took almost 2 hours. The normal parts were easy: arrival time, instructions, cat medication, weather, power outage, water in the basement, the break-in, the escape. The strange parts became worse when spoken under office lights. The study window appeared to show snow, Mercer said, not looking up from her notes. Leonard folded his hands. It was a thermal visualization panel, poorly labeled, poorly explained. Disguised as a window, I asked. He flinched. Helen answered instead. The original window failed during the first retrofit. Leonard replaced it with laminated glass and a display layer tied to exterior cameras and temperature sensors. It looked like weather. It was supposed to be intuitive, Leonard said quietly. I stared at him until he looked down. The pantry issue took longer. Leonard said the house had pocketed service spaces and old back-to-back door frames left from a 1950s remodel. During pressure changes, some doors could warp, swing through, or visually align with adjacent utility spaces in confusing ways, especially during outages when emergency lights came on in only one room. Daniel had apparently told investigators the same thing, though with more swearing. Your pantry opened onto the laundry room, Mercer said. That is how it looked, I said. Leonard nodded. There's a pass-through cavity between those walls. It should have been sealed. Should have been, I asked. His mouth tightened. Yes. The hallway lengthening became perceptual distortion due to uneven lighting, slope shift, and runner displacement. The binder pages appearing open became drafts, sticky notes, and a cat. The unsent WhatsApp typing notification became cross-device sync behavior. Helen had seen typing because Mara's message window had opened on the tablet they used while traveling. signed into the same contact thread. The app had shown typing, and then nothing. All explainable, all unsatisfying. The paper and magnetic tape in the drain were from Ben's old school projects, stored too close to the lower access after his death. When the service void flooded, the storage alcove collapsed inward. Old notebooks, cassette tapes, video labels, plastic sleeves, things Helen had not been able to throw away, were pulled into the drainage path and shredded. Helen said this without crying. That made it worse. I told Leonard to get rid of the box, she said. Then I told him not to. Then I moved it myself. Then I forgot where, Leonard whispered. I should have sealed the lower access. Yes, Helen said, one word. Not shouted, not dramatic. Just the shape of a marriage where blame had lived too long to need volume. Daniel Price had not caused Ben's death, according to the preliminary investigation. He had been a junior contractor on the retrofit, not the person in charge. But he had been present. He had warned Leonard that the manual bypass could jam if debris entered the old drain. Leonard had logged the warning, then buried it in a binder system nobody outside his own mind could safely understand. No one said criminal negligence in that room. They said civil liability, code review, structural assessment, insurance investigation, unauthorized occupancy hazards, failure to disclose, words with clean edges. I preferred them to the other ones. Before the meeting ended, Helen turned to me. I should have canceled the trip, she said. I did not know what answer she wanted. Forgiveness, maybe. Confirmation. Punishment. Yes, I said. She closed her eyes. Nodded once. Leonard looked at my splinted hand. We will cover all medical bills and your lost wages. I almost laughed. Lost wages. As if that was the shape of it. But I said, thank you, because money still mattered. My rent did not become symbolic because I was traumatized. Figaro survived. That was one of the cleaner endings. He stayed 2 nights at an emergency vet and was then taken by Helen's sister to a house in Lake Oswego, where he reportedly spent most of his recovery under a guest bed, refusing wet food unless it was warmed to exactly the right temperature. Helen sent me one photo of him 3 weeks later. He looked fat, angry, and immortal. Daniel called once. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. He said he was sorry for scaring me, sorry for breaking in, sorry for not explaining faster. He said the house had been dangerous for years, and that some people build systems not to solve grief, but to keep it operating. Then he stopped talking for a few seconds. At the end, he said, "You did the right thing when you left the handle. You chose people. That mattered." I saved the voicemail and never played it again. The Voss house was not demolished immediately. That surprised me. Engineers inspected it. Tarps went up. Chain link fencing appeared around the property. For weeks, local news described it as a landslide-damaged home in the West Hills, which was true and not enough. A neighbor gave an interview saying the owners had always been private, but polite. Another said she had heard machinery noises at odd hours for years. The city issued notices. Insurance companies did whatever insurance companies do when reality becomes expensive. December, the front half of the house had been braced with steel supports. The greenhouse was gone. The porch remained a dark break at the front, like a missing tooth. I moved out of the studio above the laundromat in January, not because of the house, but because because Owen found me a cheaper place in Milwaukee with normal floors and an ugly kitchen. He checked the locks when he helped me move in. I pretended not to notice. He pretended not to notice me noticing. For a while, ordinary things bothered me. The hum of refrigerators, the click of heat through pipes, any hallway with a runner rug, weather apps, brass latches, the polite knock of delivery drivers. Once, in a hardware store, I saw a display of 3 ring binders and had to leave without buying the screws I'd come for. Therapy helped, not magically, not in a montage. It helped the way physical therapy helps, boring, repetitive, irritating. And then one day you turn your wrist a little farther than before. My therapist, Erica, 45, female, did not care whether I believed the Voss house had defied physics. She cared that I had learned to confuse vigilance with control. Checking is not the same as preventing, she told me. I hated that sentence because it was true in a way that did not flatter me. Spring came wet and slow. My hand healed crooked in one finger, barely noticeable unless I tried to grip a mug too tightly. The cat bite scar stayed as 2 pale dots near my thumb. My shins stopped hurting, except in cold weather. Owen's truck finally died for good, and he bought a used Civic from a man in Troutdale who lied about the brakes. That, somehow, felt like life returning to normal. Almost ordinary. Cracks beneath the surface. In April, a package arrived at my new apartment with no return address. Inside was the Voss house binder, not the original, a copy. Fresh black cover, clean rings, printed label. House Sitter's Guide, revised. There was a note on top in Helen's handwriting. You should have the version with explanations. I am sorry we did not give you one. I sat at my little kitchen table for a long time before opening it. The revised guide was different. Every rule had a reason under it. If the second floor hallway appears longer than usual, do not measure it twice. Reason, floor slope and lighting shifts can trigger panic and unreliable spatial judgment during structural movement. Move to a known safe point instead. If the pantry door opens onto the laundry room, close it and wait 10 minutes. Reason, pressure differential may pull the unsealed service cavity out of alignment, forcing passage risks, entering unstable utility space. Do not place any object weighing more than 5 pounds on the landing between 2:10 a.m. and 2:40 a.m. Reason, automated sump cycle and overnight soil pressure peak create measurable deflection at stair landing. There were photos, diagrams, clear warnings, human sentences. I read all of it. Then I closed the binder and put it in the back of my closet, not because I wanted it near me, but because throwing it away felt like pretending. A week later, Owen came over for dinner. We ate takeout noodles on the floor because I still didn't own a table big enough for 2 people. He fixed a loose cabinet hinge while I cleaned up, then stood in the hallway squinting toward my bedroom. What? I asked. Nothing. Owen, he pointed with his screwdriver. Your hallway looks longer from here. I threw a dish towel at him. He laughed. I laughed too after a second. It felt strange but good, like using a healed bone. After he left, I locked the door once. Only once. I was proud of that. I turned off the kitchen light and walked toward my bedroom. The apartment was quiet except for traffic on the wet street outside and the low, steady hum of the refrigerator. Ordinary sounds. Mine. Halfway down the hall, I stopped. On the floor near the closet door sat a strip of black-brown tape, curled like a dead worm. a moment, I could not move. Then I crouched. It was cassette tape, or VHS, thin, brittle, glossy on one side. Maybe it had clung to the binder. Maybe it had fallen from the box when I opened the package. Maybe it had been stuck to my shoe since the move, dragged across months and rooms and memories until it found the one place that would hurt most. All explainable. I picked it up with a tissue and threw it away. Then I took the trash outside. When I came back in, I did not check the hallway length. I shut the door behind me, stood in the dark apartment, and listened as the refrigerator clicked off. For a second, the quiet had edges. Then a car passed outside, tires hissing over rainwater, and the world went on. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another, if you dare. Everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is I Work at an Ice Cream Parlor. The freezer room has one crucial rule. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The first thing wrong with the freezer was the light. Not off, not flickering like in a bad movie, just late. I pulled the metal handle, heard the usual wet pop of the seal breaking, and for one full second, the room beyond stayed dark, while the compressor hummed behind the wall like a truck idling in an alley. Then the bulb snapped on, too bright and too white, catching the frost on the shelves in sharp little teeth. Every tub of ice cream sat where it should have been. Vanilla bean, mint chip, strawberry, salted caramel. All lined up in squat cardboard rounds with their plastic lids rhymed over. Normal inventory. Normal cold. Except the mop bucket, which I had left outside the night before, was sitting just inside the door with its yellow ringer handle raised straight up like someone had been interrupted halfway through cleaning. My name is Connor Wellen. I'm 23, male, and at the time I was working closing shifts at Bluebell's Creamery on Congress Street in Portland, Maine. The kind of old brick storefront that looks cute in tourist photos, but sweats grease from the ceiling tiles in July. I'd moved back in with my dad after dropping out of community college, which sounds worse than it felt most days, and exactly as bad on the others. The job was supposed to be temporary. That was how I described almost everything in my life then. Temporary job, temporary room over Dad's garage, temporary plan to retake classes once I got my head straight. I was good at postponing things until they hardened into something I couldn't move. I stood there holding the freezer door open, my bare forearm prickling from the cold. Behind me, the shop was closing itself down in its usual tired way. The soft serve machine gave a final cough as it finished its heat cycle. The neon open sign buzzed against the front window. Somewhere under the counter, the receipt printer clicked for no reason, like it was thinking about saying something and changed its mind. "Connor," Maya called from the front. "You fall in." Maya Duarte was 21, female, and the newest person on our evening crew, though she had already learned the register better than I had. She was from Providence, taking a semester off from art school, and she carried herself with the jumpy confidence of someone who who had been forced to be responsible too young, and resented how good she was at it. She appeared in the doorway behind me with a stack of cleaned metal scoops in one hand, her black apron dusted with powdered sugar from the waffle cone mix. "Please don't tell me we're out of cookie dough again." A woman threatened to write a Yelp review with my full name in it today. "The bucket S in here," I said. She leaned around my shoulder, her breath fogged. "Okay, it was outside. Maybe Drew moved it. Drew left at 6. Then maybe you moved it." I looked at her. She sighed, not because she believed me, but because she didn't have the energy to argue. "Connor, I have seen you put your phone in the toppings fridge and spend 10 minutes blaming the Wi-Fi. That was one time. It was Tuesday." The sensible part of me knew she was probably right. Not about the phone, about the bucket. Closing shifts became a smear after a while. Scoop, rinse, smile, wipe, restock, repeat. The freezer was opened 50 times a night. People grabbed things and set other things down. A yellow mop bucket ending up 2 feet over a threshold wasn't a mystery. It was a workplace. Still, there was a rule about the freezer room. Not a posted rule, not laminated beside the hand washing sign. It was one of those things people tell you while doing something else, with the casual tone that makes you listen harder. On my first night, Drew had said it while showing me where we kept backup waffle cones and dry toppings. "One crucial rule," he told me. "Freezer door stays propped when you're inside." Then he had kicked a red rubber wedge across the floor with his sneaker. Drew Harlan was 38, male, our shift manager, and the sort of man who looked permanently underslept even when he claimed he'd had 8 hours. He had a shaved head, a neatly trimmed beard, and a faded navy tattoo on his forearm that he never talked about unless a customer brought it up. He managed Bluebells with a careful, contained patience, like every small disaster had already happened to him once, and he was determined not to let it surprise him again. When he gave instructions, he didn't puff them up. He just said them and expected them to stick. I had asked, "Because it locks." "Because it can," he said. That was it. No ghost story, no dead employee, no dramatic pause, just because it can. Later, he showed me the inside emergency release, a green push bar bolted to the freezer wall beside the door. He made me press it while he held the door from the other side. It worked. The latch clicked open. He nodded. "Good. Still use the wedge." I thought of that now because the wedge was not where it should have been. It usually lived beside the freezer door, half hidden behind a dented stainless prep table. A triangular red chunk of rubber, scuffed black at the corners from years of shoes and cartwheels. It was ugly and heavy and impossible to miss if you were looking for it. I looked. It wasn't there. "You seen the doorstop?" I asked. Maya shifted the scoops to her other hand. "By the prep table, it's gone." "Then use the mop bucket." The mop bucket that moved itself into the freezer. She gave me a look. "You hear yourself, right?" I did. That was the annoying part. I sounded like a guy trying to make a story out of poor housekeeping, because the alternative was admitting I had forgotten something simple again. And forgetting simple things had become a private sore spot for me. Mother had died 2 years earlier from a stroke, sudden enough that the word sudden still felt dishonest. And afterward, I started losing little pieces of the day. Keys, appointments, texts I meant to answer, conversations I had half had and half imagined. My dad joked that I got my head from him. I laughed when he said it because the other option was seeing his face close down. Maya Maya stepped past me and set the scoops on the prep table. We still need 3 tubs from back there before we can go. Vanilla, Oreo, and pistachio, right? Pistachios for tomorrow. Drew texted. He wants it pulled now so it softens enough for morning. She held up her phone. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb across the corner, but I could read the message. Pull Van/Oreo/pissed from freezer before lockup. Don't forget wedge. I stared at the last line a second too long. Maya noticed. He says that every time, pretty much. So there. He's the anxious one, not you. That almost made me laugh. From the front of the shop, a chair scraped a cross tile. We both turned. We're closed, Maya called. A man stood near the front door, one hand raised as if he had been caught in the middle of knocking on the glass. He was bundled in a gray raincoat with the hood down, late 40s maybe, his hair flattened by mist. Outside, Congress Street shone under the streetlights, black and slick from a slow April rain. A city bus hissed at the stop down by the art museum, and 2 girls in college sweatshirts hurried past sharing a jacket over their heads. The man mouthed something through the glass. Maya pointed to the sign. Closed. He tried the door anyway. It rattled against the deadbolt. Seriously, she muttered. I walked to the front, careful not to slip where someone had spilled melted blue raspberry slush near the mat. Sorry, I said through the glass. We closed at 10. The man leaned closer. His face was pale under the greenish reflection of the neon. Not sick pale, more like he had been standing in the rain long enough to lose all expression. He spoke again, and this time I caught a word. Phone. I shook my head and lifted my own phone, trying to show him he needed to use his. He tapped the glass with 2 fingers, once, twice, not hard, but with a rhythm that made me think of somebody testing a wall for studs. Maya came up beside me. Nope, absolutely not. I'm not opening that door. I wasn't going to. Good. The man looked past us into the shop. His eyes moved over the counter, the stools, the chalkboard menu, then settled somewhere behind us, toward the hall, toward the freezer. He tapped again. Then he turned and walked away, hood still down in the rain. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The shop seemed louder after he left. Refrigerators buzzed. Water dripped from the awning outside in steady ticks. The freezer compressor kicked harder, making the old wall vibrate under the framed newspaper clipping about Bluebell's best small batch ice cream in Portland. Maya locked the second bolt, even though the first was already thrown. People get weird after 10. Yeah, I said. She rubbed her arms. Can we finish? My Uber is already doing that thing where it says 7 minutes for 15 minutes. We went back down the narrow hallway past the employee lockers and the dry storage shelves. The whole back area smelled like sugar, bleach, wet cardboard, and cold metal. That smell never left my clothes. I'd catch it on myself at home and feel like I was still standing under the buzzing fluorescent lights with a scoop in my hand. The freezer door waited at the end of the hall. It was a heavy gray walk-in door, dented around the handle and framed with strips of worn rubber gasket. Someone had once stuck a smiley face sticker near the latch, but the cold had peeled half of it away, leaving only one eye and a curved yellow cheek. The thermometer beside the door read -6 Fahrenheit. Maya picked up the mop bucket and dragged it out. Its wheels squealed faintly. See, she said, doorstop, bad doorstop. It has wheels, fancy doorstop. Wheels are kind of the opposite of stopping. She bent down and locked 2 of them with her thumb. There, engineering. looked again for the red wedge. Under the prep table, behind the sanitizer bucket, beside the flour sacks. Nothing. My phone buzzed. "Drew, you guys still there?" I typed, "Closing now. Can't find wedge." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Call me," I showed Maya. Her expression changed in a small way. Not fear, irritation trying to cover uncertainty. "Why does everyone have to be dramatic tonight?" I hit call. Drew answered on the second ring. There was noise behind him, a TV too loud or maybe traffic. "You're at the freezer." "Yeah, we need to pull 3 tubs, but the wedge is missing." A pause. "Use the backup wedge." "What backup wedge?" "In the drawer under the label printer." I walked over and yanked the drawer open. Tape rolls, Sharpies, a box cutter with a cracked handle, loose rubber bands, but no wedge. "It's not here." His breathing changed, just a little. "Then don't go in until you have something solid blocking the door." "We have the mop bucket." "No wheels. They lock." "No wheels, Connor." The way he said my name made Maya look up. I tried to keep my voice light. "It's 3 tubs. I can grab them in 20 seconds. "No," Drew said. "Listen to me. You prop that door with something that cannot move, or you leave the tubs and I deal with it in the morning." Maya folded her arms. "Ask him why." I didn't need to relay it. Drew heard her. "Because the latch is bad," he said. "Because the inside release sticks when the frame frosts over. Because OSHA doesn't care that you are only going in for 20 seconds if someone has to cut you out with hypothermia. Pick whichever reason makes you move faster." That should have settled it. Bad latch, sticking release, workplace safety, explainable. But I remembered the bucket inside the freezer, the missing wedge, the man tapping the glass and looking past us. "Did you move the mop bucket before you left?" I asked. "What?" "The yellow mop bucket. Did you put it in the freezer?" Another pause. "No, why?" Maya stopped moving. The compressor hummed. The bulb inside the freezer made a tiny glass ping as it warmed from its own light. Drew said more quietly, "Is the door open right now?" I looked at it. I hadn't realized I had left it cracked, not wide, 6 inches maybe. A blade of white light lay across the hallway floor, and cold air crawled around my shoes. "Connor." "Yeah," I said. "It's open. Close it until you have a proper prop." I reached for the handle. From inside the freezer came a soft scrape, not loud, not dramatic, cardboard against metal maybe. A tub settling on a shelf, frost loosening and sliding down the wall. Something normal if you needed it to be normal. Maya whispered, "Did you hear that?" I held the phone against my ear. Drew was saying something, but I didn't catch it because the scrape came again. Then a plastic lid rolled out through the gap. It spun once on the tile, wobbled, and fell flat at my feet. Pistachio. The label was handwritten in Drew's blocky marker script, dated that morning. Maya backed up until her hip hit the prep table. "Nope." Drew's voice sharpened through the phone. "What happened?" I looked from the lid to the freezer door, to the pale spill of light inside, to the rows of tubs waiting beyond the threshold. Every reasonable explanation stood there with us, crowded and sweating under the fluorescent lights. Bad stacking. Air pressure. A shelf bumped earlier and only now giving way. A lid that had been loose. A door left cracked. Still, the pistachio tub itself was on the second shelf, 10 feet inside. I could see the round green label through the gap. The lid had come from somewhere deeper than a loose edge near the doorway. Maya grabbed my sleeve. "Close it," Drew said. "Connor, close the door." And that was the choice, right there. Close the freezer and leave the tubs. which meant explaining to Drew tomorrow why we couldn't finish the simplest part of closing and listening to Maya tell everyone I froze up over a plastic lid. Or find something heavy, prop the door properly, and go in together for 20 seconds to prove the room was only a room. I kept my hand on the handle, feeling the cold bite through the metal. Maya said, "We're not going in there." But she didn't let go of my sleeve, and neither of us moved. Maya let go of my sleeve first, which somehow made me feel worse. Not because she was leaving me there. She was. She stepped back, hugged herself against the cold spill from the freezer, and stared at the pistachio lid lying between my shoes like it was a dead bug she didn't want to admit had moved on its own. "Close it," she said again, quieter this time. I did. The freezer door shut with that heavy walk and thunk that settled into the walls. The compressor kept running behind it. Hallway warmed by maybe 1 degree, enough for the skin on my face to stop prickling, not enough for either of us to relax. Drew was still on the phone. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. Maya gave a sharp laugh. "A lid rolled out of the freezer, Drew. That's what happened." Maya put Connor on speaker. I tapped the screen and held the phone between us. Drew's voice came out small and tinny, edged with stress he was trying to sand down. "Nobody goes in until that door is blocked. I'm serious. Use one of the flour sacks if you have to. Stack 2, something heavy. Something that can't roll." "Drew," I said, "how does a lid roll out of a closed freezer?" It wasn't closed. It was cracked 6 inches. Then air pressure, uneven floor, loose lid. Somebody said it wrong earlier. Pick one. Don't invent the devil when gravity is available. He sounded like himself again for half a second, and I almost held onto that. Maya didn't. Did someone break in? There was another short pause. "Front door locked?" Drew asked. "2 bolts," she said. "Back door." I looked down the hall toward the rear exit. Beyond dry storage, past the stacked boxes of napkins and the old soft serve parts nobody had thrown away, there was a steel back door that opened into the alley behind the shop. Deliveries came through there in the mornings. Trash went out there at night. It had a deadbolt, a push bar, and a security contact that beeped if you opened it while the alarm panel was set. "We haven't checked it," I said. "Check it now, together, keep me on." That was the first concrete thing to do, and I clung to it because concrete things were easier than standing in a hallway trying not to look at a plastic lid. Check the door. Check the lock. Check the alarm panel. Find the wedge. Pull the tubs. Leave. A list. A list could save you from your own head. Maya grabbed the pistachio lid with 2 fingers and put it on the prep table, face up. There was frost stuck to the inside rim, already melting into beads. She wiped her fingers on her apron like it had left grease. We moved toward the back. The storage area at Bluebell's was too narrow for 2 people to walk side by side. So Maya went ahead, and I followed with my phone out, Drew's voice breathing faintly through the speaker. The fluorescent tube overhead buzzed and clicked every few seconds. Boxes towered to our right. Waffle cones, paper cups, napkins, plastic spoons. Those tiny wooden paddles tourists loved because they made ice cream feel old-fashioned. On the left were metal shelves loaded with syrups and dry toppings, the chocolate sprinkles in clear tubs that always looked like mouse droppings if you glanced too fast. The back door was closed. Maya reached for the knob, then stopped and looked at me. I hated that look. Not accusing, worse, waiting for me to be useful. I stepped around her and checked the deadbolt. Locked. I pressed the push bar gently. The door shifted against the frame but didn't open. Locked. The little alarm contact above it showed a steady green light. Back door's secure, I said. Good, Drew said. Now check the cameras. Maya and I both looked toward the ceiling. Bluebell's had 4 cameras, though Drew admitted only 2 worked consistently. 1 over the register. 1 facing the front door. 1 in the back hall angled toward the freezer. 1 over the alley door that mostly recorded spiders and the tops of delivery drivers' hats. The monitor was in the office, which was really a closet with a desk, a router, a safe, and 30 years of old employee schedules taped inside a cabinet. Maya said, "You can check them from your phone, can't you?" "App's not loading," Drew said. "Convenient." Maya, "What?" "I'm just saying." I understood why she was needling him. It was easier to sound angry than scared. Her voice had gone tight at the edges, and she kept looking back toward the freezer hallway, even when there was nothing to see. Drew said, "Office computer. Password is on the sticky note under the keyboard." "That feels secure," Maya muttered. We went to the office. The room was barely wide enough for the 2 of us. I sat in the cracked vinyl chair, and Maya stood behind me, leaning over my shoulder close enough that I could smell the vanilla syrup on her sleeve and the faint apple scent of her shampoo. The computer monitor woke with a blue glow that made everything look underwater. I found the sticky note. The password was Bluebell 2020, which made Maya say, "Jesus Christ," under her breath. The camera program took forever to open. The little loading wheel spun and spun. Drew said, "What do you see?" "Nothing yet." The screen divided into 4 boxes. Front counter, empty. Chairs upside down on tables. Floor wet in patches from the mop. Front door, rain on the glass. Neon sign reflected backward, nobody outside. Back door, black alley, dumpster lid shining. Back hallway, freezer door, prep table, mop bucket, both of us absent because we were in the office. Maya leaned closer. Rewind. I dragged the timeline back 10 minutes. We watched ourselves. Me at the freezer, Maya behind me, both of us reacting to the lid. The angle wasn't great. The camera was mounted high and slightly crooked. It showed the freezer door, but not deep inside. When the lid came out, it appeared from the bright gap and rolled into view exactly as we'd seen it. "Go back before that," Drew said. I dragged back further. The hallway emptied. The freezer door stayed closed. The mop bucket sat outside where I remembered leaving it, beside the prep table. "Stop," Maya said. On screen, at 10:17 p.m., the image jumped. Not a cut, more like a smear. A band of static crawling up from the bottom. Timestamp froze for 2 seconds, then caught up. When the picture cleared, the mop bucket was gone. I didn't say anything. Neither did Maya. Drew did. "How long is the dropout?" I clicked back, dragged frame by frame. "Maybe 2 seconds. Power hiccup," he said. "All 4 cameras," Maya asked. "Probably, system's old." "Then why is the bucket in the freezer after?" Drew didn't answer quickly enough. I clicked forward. There we were arriving at the freezer, me opening it. Light delayed. Bucket inside. Maya making jokes, because that was before the lid, before the man outside, before the screen showed us a 2-second hole exactly where an answer should have been. A sound came from the front of the shop. A hard knock. Not tapping this time. All 3 of us heard it through the phone, because Drew said, "Was that the door?" Maya straightened so fast her shoulder hit the shelf above the desk. A roll of receipt paper dropped and bounced off my knee. Another knock. Then a voice, muffled by the building. "Hello, mail." Outside. Close to the glass. Maya whispered, "It's him." Drew said, "Don't open." No one is opening, I said, but my mouth had gone dry. We left the office and moved quietly toward the front. That was stupid, maybe, but people do stupid things when they want information. We didn't go all the way into the customer area. We stopped at the bend in the hallway where we could see through the gap between the menu board and the wall. The man in the gray raincoat stood outside the front door again. This time he held something up to the glass. A phone. Its screen was lit bright white. From where I stood, I could only make out a map and a red low battery bar. He said phone, Maya whispered. Maybe he needs help. He can walk to the hotel, I whispered back. The Press Hotel was 2 blocks down. There were bars open on Congress. There were people around. He wasn't stranded in the woods. He was outside an ice cream shop after closing, knocking on locked glass and staring toward our freezer. The man pressed the phone to the window and spoke loudly enough for us to hear through the door. Please, my daughter's missing. Maya's face changed. That was the problem with certain sentences. They opened doors in your head before you could bolt them. Drew said through my phone, "What did he say?" I didn't answer him. The man knocked again. "She came in here 15 minutes ago. Purple jacket. She's 12. Maya looked at me. Did we have a kid in a purple jacket? I tried to replay the last hour. Families after dinner. A group of teenagers with skateboards. A couple from Boston arguing over maple walnut. A woman with a stroller. 2 boys who spilled sprinkles. Faces blurred together under the warm counter lights. Maybe, I said. Maya's eyes sharpened. Maybe, I don't know. And there it was again, the soft, ugly pressure behind my ribs. My memory, or what I had started thinking of as the hole where memory should be. I could count the drawer perfectly, remember which toppings needed wrapping, recall every sarcastic thing a customer said. But ask me about a girl in a purple jacket, and my mind gave me a dozen children in bright colors, none of them solid enough to trust. The man outside slapped his palm once against the glass. Not violent, desperate. Her phone shows here. The location shows this building. Maya whispered, "Oh my God." Drew's voice snapped. "Do not open that door. Drew, if a kid is missing, you call 911. You do not open a locked store to a stranger." He was right, completely right. Annoyingly, firmly right. I dialed 911 on Maya's phone because mine was still on the call with Drew. The dispatcher answered after one ring. "Cumberland County Regional Communications. What is the address of your emergency?" I gave the shop address, my name, and explained as cleanly as I could. Closed business. Man outside claiming his 12-year-old daughter's phone location pinged inside. Possible missing child. No visual confirmation. The dispatcher's voice stayed calm in that trained way that made me feel both safer and embarrassed. "Is the man attempting to enter?" He knocked. "Tried the door earlier. He's outside now. Keep the doors locked. Officers are being sent. Do not confront him. Do you have any reason to believe a child is inside the business?" I looked toward the freezer hallway. Maya was staring at me. "I don't know," I said. That answer did something to the room. The dispatcher asked for a description of the girl. I repeated the question through the glass without opening the door, raising my voice. The man leaned close. Lily Mercer, 12, purple rain jacket, jeans, white sneakers, brown hair. She left the apartment mad at me. Her phone location is right there. Right there. He pointed past us, not at the customer area. At the hallway, Maya's lips parted. "How does he know?" she whispered. The dispatcher heard me repeat the details. She told us officers were en route and to stay on the line if we felt unsafe. I put her on speaker too, so now Drew and the dispatcher were both in the shop with us as little voices from phones, one anxious and personal, one calm and official. The man outside began pacing. Maya turned away from the front and hurried to the counter. We should check the bathrooms. Together, Drew said. I know, she snapped. The bathrooms were empty. So was the tiny staff bathroom near the office. We checked behind the counter, under the booths, the storage closet where spare paper goods were stacked, the dry storage area again. Nothing. No purple jacket. No kid. No phone buzzing under a table. But near the back hallway, half tucked under the prep table by the freezer, Maya found something small and white. A sneaker, child-sized. It lay on its side with the laces loose and the sole wet from tracked in rain. Maya didn't touch it. Connor, I crouched. The shoe had a little silver star charm threaded through one lace. Not a toddler's shoe. Older kid. 12 sounded right. The dispatcher asked what we found. I told her. Do not move it, she said. Officers are close. Drew said. Where exactly is it? By the prep table, I said. Outside the freezer. The freezer compressor kicked off. The sudden absence of the hum made every other sound come forward. Rain ticking the front windows. Maya breathing through her mouth. The man outside calling Lily in a raw, breaking voice. The low buzz of the fluorescent tube. Then, from inside the freezer, a phone vibrated once. A brief, insect-like rattle against metal. Maya covered her mouth. The dispatcher's tone changed only slightly. You heard a phone inside the freezer. Yes, I said. Drew said, no. No, Connor, listen to me. You wait for police. They're close, the dispatcher said. Stay where you are. The phone vibrated again. This time it was followed by a tiny chime, muffled by insulation and steel. A notification sound. Maya whispered, What if she's in there? I looked at the door. The thermometer read -6. If a child had gone into the walk-in and the door shut behind her, minutes mattered. But if someone had put her phone in there, or if the man outside was lying, or if this was some setup for robbery, opening that door could make everything worse. That was the time-sensitive problem in its cleanest, cruelest form. A possible child in a freezer, a malfunctioning door, a missing wedge, police not there yet, and me, the guy who couldn't remember whether he'd seen a purple jacket 20 minutes earlier, standing closest to the handle. Maya started moving first, grabbed 2 25-pound sacks of waffle mix from dry storage and dragged them across the floor. What are you doing? I asked. What Drew said, something heavy. No wheels, Drew swore softly. Maya, don't. If she's in there, we can't just stand here. We don't know that she is. We don't know that she is. I helped her because my body chose before my brain finished arguing. We stacked the sacks against the freezer threshold. Not enough. The door was heavy, and the floor sloped slightly toward the drain. I grabbed a crate of glass soda bottles from under the counter, the old-fashioned kind Bluebells sold at ridiculous prices to tourists, and wedged it beside the sacks. Maya shoved the mop bucket behind the crate, wheels locked, a bad idea added to better ones. Drew kept talking. Listen to me, both of you. If you open that door, one person stays outside. One person only reaches from the threshold. Nobody steps in. Do you understand? The dispatcher said, For your safety, wait for officers. Outside, the man screamed his daughter's name and hit the glass with both hands. The front door rattled in its frame. Maya flinched. He's going to break it. A siren sounded somewhere in the city. Far, maybe coming toward us, maybe not. I put my hand on the freezer handle. "Connor," Drew said, not a command this time, almost a plea. I pulled. The seal broke. Cold spilled over our shoes, thick and immediate. The light inside lagged again. For that 1 second of dark, the phone inside the freezer lit up by itself. A rectangle of pale light glowed from the floor under the second shelf, 10 feet in, right below the pistachio tub. Then the overhead bulb snapped on. The freezer was empty of people. No girl, no purple jacket. No shape curled behind the tubs, just shelves, frost, cardboard rounds, and a white phone lying face up on the metal floor, vibrating against a grate. Maya made a sound that was half relief, half nausea. "Go in," Drew said. I crouched at the threshold, stretching my arm. Too far. The phone was beyond reach. Maya grabbed the long metal handle of the mop from the bucket. "Use this." I took it, lay on my stomach on the cold tile outside the freezer, and reached in with the mop handle. The cold bit through my shirt where my chest pressed the threshold. My fingers shook. I hooked the phone, dragged it an inch, then another. The screen flashed with repeated calls. "Dad, Dad, Dad." The man outside. 1 more inch. The mop handle slipped. The phone skittered sideways under the shelf. "Damn it," I whispered. "Leave it," Drew said. Maya said, "We need it for the police." The siren grew louder, then faded as if it had turned down another street. Outside, glass cracked. A sharp pop from the front of the shop. Maya spun around. He broke the door. Not shattered, not yet. But the sound came again, a fist or an elbow or something metal striking the lower pane. The dispatcher's voice rose. "Move away from the front entrance. Officers are almost there." Almost. That word stretched. Maya looked from the front of the shop to the phone under the freezer shelf. "Connor, we have to shut this door. We need the phone. We need to not be trapped between him and this." Another hit from the front. The glass spidered. I shoved the mop handle under the shelf again, teeth clenched, and managed to drag the phone closer. 6 feet. 4. Close enough that Maya could reach if she stepped 1 foot inside. "No," Drew said immediately. "Maya, don't." She ignored him. "Maya, 1 foot," she said. She planted her left foot over the threshold, leaned in, and snatched the phone. At the same moment, the crate of soda bottles shifted. Not much, just enough. The mop bucket rolled backward despite its locked wheels, pushed by the crate, nudged by the weight of the door pressing against the stacked sacks. 1 glass bottle tipped over inside the crate and cracked against another with a bright, delicate sound. The freezer door began to swing inward. I grabbed it with both hands. Maya stumbled back out, phone clutched to her chest. For half a second, I held the door open against its own weight, my shoes sliding on the damp tile, shoulders burning. Then the waffle sacks sagged. The crate twisted. The bucket wheels squealed. The door slammed against my left hand. Pain went white and hot through my knuckles. I yanked free with a yell, and the door thudded almost shut, stopped only by 1 crushed corner of the soda crate. A gap remained. 3 inches. Enough to keep the latch from catching. Not enough for a person. From the front of the shop came the sound of glass giving way. The man shouted, "Lily." Maya stood frozen with the girl's phone in her hand, and behind her, the freezer door pressed harder against the broken crate, closing by fractions. Drew's voice crackled from the floor where my phone had fallen. "Get out of the building." But the back door was past the freezer. The front was breaking open, and the only thing between us and being trapped in that narrowing hallway was a freezer door with 1 bad latch, one crushed crate, and no proper wedge. The first thing I did after the glass broke was try to pick up my phone. That sounds ridiculous now. There were a dozen smarter priorities. Get Maya away from the freezer. Block the hallway. Find another exit. Keep the stranger out. Stop my hand from swelling around the knuckles like a glove filling with water. But Drew was still shouting through the speaker, and the dispatcher was still on Maya's phone, and my own phone had skidded beneath the prep table when the freezer door slammed on me. It lay face up in a puddle of meltwater, screen cracked at the corner, Drew's name pulsing with each clipped burst of his voice. Connor, Connor, answer me. I bent for it and nearly dropped to one knee when pain shot through my left hand. The freezer door had caught my ring and middle fingers across the second knuckles. They weren't broken in any dramatic sideways way, but they were already going purple, and the skin over one knuckle had split. Blood looked too bright on cold tile. Maya grabbed my right arm. Leave it. We need Drew. We need to move. From the front of the shop, something heavy hit the glass again. The lower pane gave with a crackling cough, little pebbles of safety glass scattering across the entry mat. The man outside yelled, Lily, Lily, answer me. The layout of Bluebells was simple when you were serving customers, and suddenly hateful when you needed a way out. Front door and windows on Congress Street. Customer area with 6 little round tables. Counter running along the right wall if you faced in from the street. Behind the counter, the hallway narrowed and bent left toward the office. Dry storage, the staff bathroom, the walk-in freezer, and finally the back door to the alley. The freezer sat halfway between the front and back, like a plugged artery. And right then, its door was not fully open or fully shut. The crushed soda crate held a 3-inch gap. The sacks of waffle mix slumped against the threshold. The mop bucket had rolled crooked. Cold poured out low and thick, making the floor slicker by the second. Maya still had Lily's phone clutched in one hand. Its screen lit again. Dad, the call buzzed against her palm. Don't answer, I said. She stared at me. Why not? Because he's 10 feet away. Another crash came from the front. The man had cleared enough of the broken lower pane to shove an arm through. I heard the bolt rattle, heard him grunt when the jagged glass caught his sleeve or skin. Maya's face tightened. Back door. We ran for it, or tried to. That was our first attempt, the obvious one. Get out through the alley and let the police sort the rest from the sidewalk. Maya went first past the freezer, stepping wide around the freezing spill. I followed, cradling my injured left hand against my chest. The hallway pinched there, with the freezer on the right and dry storage shelves on the left. And as I passed the cracked open freezer door, it shifted against the soda crate with a grinding noise. I froze. Maya looked back. Connor. The door moved another inch, not toward closing, toward opening. The crate, crushed on one side, slid under pressure and then popped loose. The freezer door swung outward just enough to block half the hallway. No, 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 Maya said. I shoved it back with my shoulder, hissing when my hand bumped the metal edge. The door resisted, heavy and slow, its hydraulic closer fighting me with dumb patience. We managed to squeeze past, but it took long enough for the man at the front to get the inside bolt open. The bell over the front door jingled. That stupid, cheerful bell. It was the worst sound I'd heard all night. Lily, the man shouted from inside the shop now. Lily. Drew's voice, faint from under the prep table behind us, became just noise. Maya's phone speaker crackled with the dispatcher asking if we were safe. We reached the back door. Maya pushed the bar. Nothing. She pushed again, harder, the bar depressed, but the door didn't open more than half an inch before catching with a dull metal clank. "Deadbolt," I said. "You checked it." "I checked it locked." "Unlock it." I twisted the thumb turn above the push bar. It wouldn't move. Not stuck like an old lock. Blocked. Solid. I tried with my right hand, then forgot and grabbed with my left. Pain burst up my arm. I made a sound I'm embarrassed to remember. Maya took over, both hands on the thumb turn, jaw clenched. Come on, nothing. Then we saw why. A steel security chain had been looped through the crash bar from the outside and padlocked to the alley side handle. It was pulled tight enough that the door could only open a crack. I could see the chain through the gap, wet with rain, links shining under the alley light. Maya whispered, "That wasn't there earlier." "I didn't see it. You checked the door." "I checked from inside." "You didn't open it." "No." She stared at me, and I hated her for half a second because the look said exactly what I was already saying to myself. Connor missed it. Connor forgot. Connor checked wrong. The man's footsteps scraped over broken glass in the customer area. He wasn't running. That made it worse. "Hello," he called. "I just want my daughter." Maya lowered her voice. "Office. We can lock ourselves in." "The office door doesn't lock." "Bathroom. Staff bathroom lock is a hook latch." "Then what?" The dispatcher's voice came from Maya's phone. "Can you exit through the back?" Maya lifted the phone with a shaking hand. "No, it's chained from outside. He's inside now. Move to a room you can secure. Officers are arriving. Almost. Close." Words that had no weight against a padlock chain. We backed away from the rear door. That attempt had failed, but it revealed something that tightened everything. Somebody had blocked the exit from the alley side. Not the freezer, not gravity, not our imagination. A human being had put that chain there. The shop suddenly felt less like a place where a bad thing might happen, and more like a place arranged for it. The man appeared at the far end of the hallway. He had cut his hand getting in. Blood ran from his wrist into his palm, diluted pink by rainwater dripping off his sleeve. He was breathing hard, eyes moving too fast, face twisted with panic or fury or both. "Where is she?" he said. Maya raised Lily's phone. "We found this in the freezer. Police are coming." That stopped him. For 1 second, all the anger went out of his face and left something more frightened behind. "Why was it in there?" "We don't know," I said. "Where's Lily?" "We don't know." His gaze dropped to the white sneaker on the floor near the prep table, still untouched where we'd found it. He made a noise like he'd been punched. "That's hers." Maya softened despite herself. "Sir, listen to me. We called 911. They told us to stay put. We need to wait." He stepped forward. "You locked her in there." "No," I said. "You work here. We just found the phone." "You work here," he said again, louder, as if repetition could make it an explanation. Maya backed up until her shoulder touched the dry storage shelf. "Stay there." He didn't. I grabbed the nearest thing I could with my good hand, the mop handle. Not exactly a weapon, but long enough to put space between us. "Sir, stop," he did, but not because of the mop. From inside the freezer came a thump, heavy, low. The man's head snapped toward it. Maya's mouth opened. My grip tightened so hard on the mop handle that my injured fingers pulsed in sympathy. Another thump. Then a muffled scraping. The man whispered, "Lily." He lunged for the freezer door. Maya shouted, "Don't." I tried to block him, but he was bigger than me and desperate, and desperation has its own muscle. He slammed his shoulder into the freezer door, knocking it wider. The sacks of waffle mix slid. The door swung open. The freezer light blinked on. Something pale moved on the floor under the second shelf. The man screamed his daughter's name and stepped inside. For one terrible second, I thought it was a hand. It was. It was a plastic delivery sheet, the kind we laid over tubs during inventory when frost got bad, loosened from the shelf and flapping in the cold air from the moving door. The thump had been the pistachio tub shifting when the lid came off. The scraping was its cardboard side sliding against the metal rack. Misdirection. Explainable. Stupid. Also nearly fatal, because the man was now 2 steps inside the freezer, and the door, released from our broken pile of props, began swinging back. Out. Drew's voice screamed from somewhere behind us, still on my phone, still hearing pieces. I grabbed the man's raincoat with my right hand. Maya grabbed his other sleeve. He fought us without meaning to, twisting toward the shelves, calling for Lily, pawing between tubs like she might be folded behind Oreo and Vanilla Bean. "There's nobody in there," Maya shouted. "Look," he looked, really looked. The freezer was narrow and bright and brutally plain. Shelves on both sides, metal floor, frosted drain grate. No child. He stopped fighting just long enough for us to haul him backward. The freezer door hit my shoulder as we came out. I shoved it away, slipped on meltwater, and went down hard on one knee. Pain sparked under my kneecap. Maya stumbled over me but kept her feet. The man fell against the prep table, knocking the pistachio lid onto the floor again. The door swung closed. This time, nothing stopped it. The latch caught. A solid click. All 3 of us stared at it. The thermometer read -5. The man sagged against the prep table, chest heaving. Up close, I saw he wasn't some monster from outside. He was middle-aged, exhausted, bleeding, and terrified. His raincoat smelled like wet wool and street grime. His eyes were red in the corners. "My name is Paul Mercer," he said, as if remembering we needed that. "I'm her father. She turned her location on after we fought. I followed it here. I swear to God, I followed it here." Maya lifted the phone again. "Then, why is it here and she is?" Paul looked at it like it might answer. That was our second attempt. Confront the apparent threat, check the freezer again, prove whether Lily was inside. It failed too. We learned the man was probably exactly what he claimed, or at least terrified enough to make lies unnecessary. We learned the freezer was empty. We learned the phone had been placed there without Lily. And we lost the only open state of the freezer door. Now it was shut, latched, and the proper wedge was still gone. The police siren came close enough to brighten the front windows blue for an instant. Relief hit me so fast I almost sat down. Then the lights went out. Not all at once. The front neon sign clicked off first. The menu board glow died. Then the hallway fluorescents blinked, buzzed, and dropped us into a thick gray emergency dimness lit only by Maya's phone, Lily's phone, and a small red exit sign over the chained back door. The freezer compressor stopped. The sudden quiet was physical. My ears filled with the small wet sounds of people breathing. Maya said, "Power outage." Paul turned toward the front. Blue light flashed again across the broken glass, but it didn't move like a patrol car parking. It slid past. A siren Dopplered away. "Not for us," I said. Maya swore. The dispatcher's voice came from her phone, broken and thin. "Units are rerouting around. Repeat your location." Maya raised the phone. "We're still inside. Power just went out. He's inside with us, but he's the father. The back door is chained. The call crackled, then dropped. No, Maya said. She tapped the screen, one bar, then none. My own phone still lay under the prep table, lit faintly, but when I crawled for it, the screen was black. Water had gotten under the cracks. Drew was gone. We had no dispatcher. No Drew, no lights. No open exit. A bleeding father. A possible missing child. A freezer door that had just latched. Then Lily's phone chimed. All of us looked at it. Maya's hand trembled as she turned the screen toward us. A text preview sat over the missed calls. Unknown number. Tell him to stop looking. Paul made a sound I don't have a clean word for. Maya whispered, "Who is that?" The phone chimed again. Unknown number. Back room, camera is blind for 2 sec. Every 5 min my mouth went dry. The camera dropout had not been a glitch. The text continued typing. Unknown number. Freezer isn't the place, it's the way to make you move. Paul lunged for the phone, but Maya jerked it back. Don't touch it, she snapped. It's about my daughter. It's evidence. She's my daughter. His shout filled the narrow hallway and bounced off the metal shelves. Somewhere near the front, broken glass shifted under its own weight with a tinkling slide. I forced myself to breathe through my nose. Sugar, bleach, wet cardboard, blood, cold metal. A thud came from the alley door. We all turned. Another thud, not the freezer this time, the back exit. Someone was outside in the alley. The chain rattled hard enough to shake the crash bar. Maya backed toward me. Police. Police would announce, I said, though I wasn't sure. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe in a broken shop with a possible kidnapping, they would do all kinds of things I didn't know. Paul shouted, "Help, we're in here." I grabbed his sleeve. Wait, too late. From outside, a voice said, "Open the door." Male, low. Not a shout. Close to the gap. Paul surged toward it. "Do you have Lily?" The chain rattled again. "Open the door," the voice repeated. Maya lifted Lily's phone, using its flashlight. The beam hit the back door's small gap and caught rainwater running down the chain links outside. Something else, too. A black-gloved hand threaded through the handle, holding the padlock steady. Not unlocking it, holding it, keeping it closed. I felt the shop map itself in my head with cruel clarity. Front entrance broken and exposed to Congress Street. But whoever had sent those texts wanted us moving, not leaving. Back door chained from outside, someone physically there. Freezer in the middle of the rear hall, door latched. Office useless. Bathrooms flimsy. Dry storage full of heavy objects and narrow shelves. The counter area ahead was open, but covered in broken glass. The alley behind us was controlled by someone we couldn't see. Maya whispered, "Connor." The freezer compressor clicked once in the dark, trying to restart and failing. Then the freezer's emergency alarm began to beep. A sharp pulse from the control panel beside the door. Beep, beep, beep. The digital temperature display, running on backup battery, flickered from -5 to -3. Drew had once told me the freezer door release could stick when the frame frosted over. He had not told me what happened when power failed, the compressor stopped, and the old control panel thought the door seal had been compromised. The magnetic safety lock engaged with a metallic clack. I knew what it was because Drew had shown me the manual lockout button once, joking that the system was older than most of our employees and twice as moody. The freezer door was now sealed by the emergency lock, not to keep people in, to keep the cold in during outages. Procedural failure. Bad design. Old equipment. A trap made out of maintenance shortcuts. Maya tried the handle anyway. It didn't budge. Paul shoved in beside her, pulling, cursing, bleeding onto the metal. Nothing. The phone in Maya's hand chimed a final time. Unknown number. Now choose. At the same moment, heavy footsteps crunched through the broken glass at the front of the shop. Not one set. 2, maybe 3. Maya looked toward the customer area. Paul looked toward the chained back door. I looked at the freezer panel, blinking its red warning light in the dark. And then at the narrow stairwell door beside dry storage that led down to the old basement utility room. I had forgotten about it until that second. A short set of wooden stairs under a hatch-style door, used for breakers, water shutoffs, and storage nobody wanted to inventory. No public exit. No comfort. But the breaker panel was down there, and if we could restore power, maybe the freezer lock would release. Maybe the cameras would come back. Maybe the alarm system would reconnect. Or maybe we would be cornering ourselves below street level while unknown people entered from the front and someone held the back door shut from outside. The footsteps in the front stopped. A voice called from the dark customer area, calm and unfamiliar. "Paul, you should have listened." Paul went rigid. He knew that voice. That was the point of no return, not the power outage, not the broken glass, not even the locked freezer. It was the look on Paul Mercer's face when the stranger called him by name, and I understood, finally, that this had never been only about a lost girl or a bad latch. Maya grabbed the basement hatch handle. I picked up the cracked box cutter from the label printer drawer with my good hand. Paul whispered, "No," but the voices were already moving down the hallway, and the only direction left was down. Maya got the basement hatch open on the third pull. It stuck at first, swollen from years of damp, and for one panicked second, I thought we had found another door that would not open. Then she planted one sneaker against the wall, yanked with both hands, and the wood came free with a ripping scrape that sounded too loud in the dead shop. Cold air slid past our ankles from the freezer. Rain blew in somewhere behind us through the broken front. The freezer alarm kept beeping. Beep, beep, beep. From the dark customer area, the unfamiliar voice called, "Paul, don't make this worse." Paul stood frozen in the hallway, Lily's phone reflected in his wet eyes. Maya aimed the phone flashlight down into the hatch. Narrow wooden stairs dropped into blackness. The basement smelled like standing water, dust, and hot electrical plastic, though the power was out. "Move," Maya whispered. Paul didn't. The footsteps crunched closer over broken glass. More than one person. Slow, careful. Knew the layout enough not to rush. I shoved the cracked box cutter into Paul's hand because mine was shaking too badly to trust it. "If you know them, now is the time to say something." He looked at the cutter like I had handed him a confession. "I owed money." Maya stared at him. "What? My brother, not me. My brother owed them. I paid some, not enough." "Where's Lily?" I asked. His face folded around the question. "I don't know." That answer sounded too broken to be a lie. Maya hissed, "Down." Now, she went first, phone in one hand, the other sliding along the wall. I followed, half falling because my left hand was useless, and my knee had started to throb from when I'd hit the tile. Paul came last, lowering the hatch above him as quietly as he could. It did not close all the way. The wood had warped. A half-inch line of hallway remained above us, leaking red pulses from the freezer alarm. The basement under Bluebell's was not a real room so much as a long, low utility crawl space pretending to be useful. The stairs ended on a concrete floor dusted white with mineral stains. Directly ahead was the breaker panel, a gray metal box mounted on brick. To the left were old syrup boxes, a broken patio umbrella, and 3 plastic tubs of seasonal decorations. To the right, water pipes ran along the ceiling toward a small service alcove under the front of the shop. You could not stand straight unless you were short. Maya could. Paul and I had to bend. The freezer alarm pulsed above us, muffled now. Beep, beep. Maya moved to the breaker panel. Tell me what to flip. I don't know. You work here. I scoop ice cream. That's not helpful, Connor. She was right. I hated that she was right. I wiped my good hand on my apron and opened the panel. Breakers were labeled in Drew's block letters on tape. Front lights, POS, soft serve, freezer comp, freezer lock, office, back hall, spare, do not touch. Freezer lock, I said. Maya's hand hovered. Above us, the hatch creaked. All 3 of us stopped breathing. A strip of light widened, not electric light, phone light. Someone upstairs was shining down through the gap. A man's voice said, close now, they went under. Paul whispered, Nate. The name made the basement smaller. Nate who? Maya mouthed. Paul swallowed. Delaney, my brother's old boss. Another voice, deeper, answered from upstairs. Then pull them out. The hatch lifted. Maya flipped freezer lock. Nothing happened. She flipped it back, then again. Still nothing. Main power's out, I whispered. Breaker won't matter until, then why did you make me flip it? Because I panicked. She looked like she wanted to hit me. Then the hatch swung open above us, and she didn't have time. A man started down, wore black gloves and a dark jacket wet at the shoulders. Not huge, maybe mid-30s, clean haircut, ordinary face. That was worse. Ordinary people can do terrible things and still look like somebody who waits politely at crosswalks. He pointed a flashlight at us. Phone, Maya backed away. Give me the girl's phone, he said. Paul stepped between them, box cutter low in his hand. Where is she, Nate? Nate looked at him with irritated disappointment, like Paul had shown up late to work. Safe. For now. Paul moved up 1 stair. Nate raised something in his other hand. A stun gun, not a movie taser with wires. A handheld contact 1, black and square. He snapped it on. Blue arcs cracked at the end, lighting the basement wall in ugly flashes. Maya flinched and dropped Lily's phone. It hit the concrete, flashlight beam spinning across pipes, boxes, our shoes. Nate smiled a little. Good, Paul lunged. It was brave and useless. Nate jabbed the stun gun into Paul's upper arm. The crack was small. Paul's whole body buckled. He crashed sideways into the breaker panel, shoulder first, box cutter skittering across the floor. The panel door banged against brick. Maya screamed, then clapped a hand over her mouth. I grabbed the nearest thing in reach, a plastic tub of Christmas decorations. I swung it two-handed, forgetting my left hand, until pain tore up my arm. The tub hit Nate in the knees, not hard enough to stop him, hard enough to make him stumble. Glass ornaments burst across the concrete. Cheap red balls rolled underfoot. Tinsel spilled like metallic weeds. Nate cursed and swung the flashlight. It caught me across the cheek, a flash of white, a taste of copper. I fell back into the water pipes and hit my head against one hard enough to make the room tilt. Maya moved while he looked at me. She kicked the dropped phone under the old syrup boxes. Nate saw it. Don't. She ran the other direction, toward the service alcove. He went after her. That saved us and trapped her. The basement was long but not open. Boxes and pipes made lanes. Maya slipped through the narrow right side gap easily. Nate had to duck and turn his shoulders. I pushed off the pipe, dizzy, and saw Paul trying to sit up, his arm twitching from the shock. "Paul," I whispered, "get up." He stared at me, not seeing. From above, another man shouted, "Nate." "Stay there," Nate barked. Maya reached the service alcove under the front of the shop. There was no exit there, just old plumbing, a capped drain, and the shut-off valves Drew had once told me never to touch unless the building was actively flooding. Drew, the shut-offs, the freezer rule. The door had to stay propped open because the latch and release were bad. The emergency lock had sealed when the power died. The intruders had counted on that, on us moving, on the camera dropout. But they had not counted on the building being old and badly maintained in a dozen other ways. I grabbed the box cutter from the floor. Nate cornered Maya near the valves. "Phone," he said. "I don't have it." He raised the stun gun again. "Then tell me where." She looked past him at me for half a second, not at my face, at the pipes above my head. A small white tag hung from one valve, freezer condenser water line. Another, front sink. Another, mop basin. I understood just enough to do something stupid. I dragged myself to the valve-tagged mop basin and twisted it with my good hand. Nothing. Rusted. Nate turned at the sound. I jammed the box cutter under the plastic zip tie, holding a bundle of old tubing against the wall, and pulled. The blade slipped, cut my thumb. I pulled again. The tie snapped, and a sagging, flexible line dropped. Nate started toward me. Maya grabbed the freezer condenser valve with both hands and turned. It gave. A pipe above us knocked once, then shuddered. Somewhere upstairs, in the wall behind the freezer, water began to rush. Not a neat sound. A violent, pressurized hiss. Nate hesitated. "What did you do?" he said. "I don't know," Maya said, and laughed once, wild and breathless. "But you should probably care." The basement lights flickered, just once. A generator, backup, a delayed reset. I never learned. The panel buzzed behind Paul's shoulder. The red alarm above us changed pitch. Beep, 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 beep. A metal clack came from upstairs. The freezer emergency lock releasing. Nate heard it too. His face changed. "Up," he shouted to the man above. "Check the freezer." That was when Paul came back to himself. He didn't stand, he crawled. Nate turned toward the stairs, and Paul wrapped both arms around his legs. "Run," Paul said. Nate kicked him in the ribs. Paul held on. Maya sprinted past them. I followed slower because my knee had stiffened and my head rang with each heartbeat. Nate twisted, reaching for my ankle, and his gloved fingers brushed my shoe. I kicked back and caught him in the chin. Not clean, not heroic. My heels scraped teeth. He grunted, and Paul dragged him down again. We hit the stairs. Above us, the hallway was lit in red pulses from the freezer alarm and blue-white flashes from someone's phone. The freezer door stood unlocked now, handle trembling slightly from the alarm vibration. Another man waited near the prep table, bigger than Nate, hood up, face covered by a black gaiter. He had the missing red wedge in one hand. The sight of it made something in me snap. Not fear, anger. The stupid red wedge. The one simple safety tool that would have kept the night from becoming a maze. He had it like a trophy, scuffed rubber dangling from his glove. Maya saw it too. "You took it." The man looked toward the basement hatch. "Where's Nate?" Paul answered by slamming into the back of his knees from below. He had followed us up the stairs on hands and knees, breath ragged, face gray. He caught the man low. The man staggered into the prep table. The pistachio lid shot off the edge and spun across the floor again. The man swung the wedge. It hit Paul over the ear with a dull rubber smack that still dropped him hard. Maya screamed his name. The freezer door stood open beside us, no longer sealed. Cold rolled out around our calves. The man raised the wedge again. I threw the mop bucket. It was not a good throw. It was heavy, awkward, half full of gray water, but the hallway was narrow. It hit him in the shins and burst sideways, dirty water spreading over the tile. He slipped, caught himself on the freezer door, and for 1 second, his back was to the open walk-in. Maya moved. She didn't shove him into the freezer, not fully. She drove her shoulder into his hip with everything she had. He stumbled backward across the threshold, 1 foot inside, 1 outside. He grabbed her apron. I reached for her with my injured hand and almost blacked out from the pain. My fingers didn't work. She was being pulled forward, sneaker sliding over wet tile. The freezer alarm screamed now, a continuous tone. Nate came out of the basement behind us, 1 hand on the stair rail, stun gun still in the other. Everything narrowed. The man in the freezer doorway yanked Maya closer. Nate raised the stun gun toward my back. Paul, bleeding from the side of his head, groaned on the floor. And I saw the soda crate, crushed, cracked, forgotten beside the threshold. 1 bottle remained intact, wedged between the crate slats. I grabbed it with my good hand and smashed it against the prep table. The sound was enormous in the hallway. The bottle broke jagged. Nate stopped. The man at the freezer door looked at the glass in my hand. I didn't stab anybody. I wish I could say I was too moral, but the truth is I was too scared and too clumsy. Instead, I slashed downward at Maya's apron tie where the man had twisted it in his fist. The fabric cut. Maya fell backward into me. The man lost his grip, stepped deeper into the freezer to catch his balance, and hit the metal shelf shoulder first. Tubs rocked. Vanilla bean dropped and split open on the floor. Nate lunged. Maya kicked the freezer door with both feet. The door swung inward. The man inside tried to push it back, but his shoes slipped in the spilled ice cream. His hand slapped the inside emergency release bar. Nothing happened. It stuck, just like Drew had warned. The door hit the frame. Not latched yet. The man shoved from inside, roaring. Nate reached us. Paul grabbed the red wedge from the floor where it had fallen. For a terrible second, I thought he would use it to keep the freezer open. Instead, he jammed it under the outside edge of the door, not as a prop, but as a block against the man's push from inside. The wedge caught between tile and metal. The door couldn't open outward more than an inch. "Hold it," Paul shouted. Maya and I slammed our shoulders into the door. Nate drove the stun gun into my side. Pain detonated. My muscles locked. My jaw clamped so hard I bit my tongue. I fell against the freezer door, not holding it by choice anymore, but because my body had become a stiff, useless weight. Maya screamed and swung the mop handle at Nate's wrist. The stun gun flew, skittered under the prep table, and sparked once in the meltwater before going dark. Nate punched her. It caught her above the eye. Her head snapped sideways, and she went down on 1 knee. Paul left the wedge and tackled Nate into the dry storage shelves. Boxes came down. Sprinkles burst open. Paper cups rained across the floor. Nate and Paul hit the tile together, grappling in the mess. Inside the freezer, the man kicked the door. The wedge shifted. I couldn't move right. My side burned and twitched. My left hand was useless. My mouth was full of blood from my tongue. Maya crawled to the door, one eye already swelling. She looked at me. "Connor," she said. "Latch." I understood. We had been trying to keep the door shut with our bodies. But the latch was bad in one specific way. Once it caught, it held too well. The danger that could trap us could trap him. I grabbed the handle with my good hand and pulled the door open half an inch against the man's next kick. He shoved. Maya yanked the red wedge free. The door moved outward. Then I let go. The closer did the rest. The door slammed. The latch caught with a clean, final click. The man inside hit the door from the other side hard enough to shake frost from the frame. Once, twice. Then he slapped the emergency release bar again and again. It didn't open. Maya sat back on the wet tile, shaking. "We can't leave him in there," she said. No triumph, no relief, just horror at what we had done, because it was the only thing that stopped him. Nate heard the latch and panicked. He drove his elbow into Paul's face, shoved him away, and scrambled toward the front. He slipped on sprinkles, caught the wall, kept going. I tried to stand and couldn't. Maya tried to grab him, but her balance was gone. Paul reached out, missed Nate's ankle by inches. Nate disappeared toward the customer area. Then he ran straight into blue light. Real blue light this time. Flashlights, voices, boots over glass. "Portland police. Get on the ground." Nate turned back toward us, hands half raised, half ready to run. He had nowhere left. 2 officers came through the broken front, weapons drawn, shouting commands that overlapped in the narrow shop. Nate dropped to his knees. Another officer moved past him, saw Paul bleeding, Maya on the floor, me twitching against the freezer door, and the red alarm panel screaming. "There's someone in the freezer," Maya said. The officer looked at the door. "Alive." The man inside kicked it again. The officer swore. Drew arrived less than a minute later, though I don't know from where. Maybe he had been driving in since the first call. Maybe someone reached him after the 911 dispatcher lost us. He came through the broken front in a hoodie and jeans, face white, breathless, and went straight to the freezer. "Don't pull it," he told the officer. "The release sticks. You yank the handle, it can shear the latch." "Then how do we open it?" Drew looked at the water on the floor, the alarm panel, the breaker reset light. "Kill the lock from the panel. Then lift, don't pull." "I flipped it," Maya said weakly. Drew glanced at me, then at her. "Power's back now." An officer went down to the basement with him. Another kept his weapon on Nate. A third knelt by Paul, pressing gauze to his head from a first aid kit. The freezer alarm stopped. The silence after it was not peaceful. It was bruised. Drew came back up. He put both hands on the freezer handle, lifted slightly, and pulled. The door opened. The man inside fell out on his hands and knees, gasping, face red, eyelashes frosted at the tips. One wrist bent wrong from pounding the door. He was conscious, alive, furious, terrified. Police cuffed him before he could stand. Nobody cheered. Paul kept saying Lily's name until one officer crouched beside him and said something I didn't catch. Then Paul broke down so hard his whole body folded forward. Later, I learned Lily was found 2 blocks away in the back of a closed flower shop, locked in a storage room with a space heater and a bottle of water. Alive, drugged lightly, frightened badly, but alive. Nate's crew had used her phone to pull Paul to Bluebells because they knew the back hallway cameras dropped every few minutes. Knew Drew's old freezer system could be manipulated. Knew panic would do more work than force. But in that moment, on the wet tile beside the freezer, I didn't know any of that. I only knew Maya was bleeding above one eye. Paul was sobbing with his hands cuffed in front of him until the officers sorted out who he was, and my left hand had swollen so badly my fingers looked like they belonged to someone else. Drew crouched beside me. "You broke the rule," he said. I tried to laugh and tasted blood instead. "Yeah," I said, "but we used the wedge." He looked at the freezer door, then at the red rubber triangle lying in the meltwater. For once, he had no answer. First doctor who looked at my hand said, "You're lucky." People say that a lot after bad things happen. It's meant kindly. I know that. But sitting under fluorescent lights in the emergency department at Maine Medical Center, with dried ice cream crusted on my shoe and my left hand swollen into a purple-white knot, I did not feel lucky. I felt stupid, sore, and very awake. The doctor was a woman in blue scrubs with tired eyes and a badge that kept flipping backward when she leaned over me. She asked me to wiggle my fingers. I tried. My ring finger moved. My middle finger did not. "Again," she said. I tried again. Pain bloomed up my wrist, not sharp exactly, heavy, like my bones had been packed too tightly under the skin. "Possible fracture," she said. "Maybe tendon involvement. We'll x-ray, clean the cuts, splint you for now, and have ortho follow up." That sounds like more than lucky. She smiled without showing teeth. "Lucky means you still have the fingers." I stopped arguing. Maya was 3 curtains down. I could hear her before I saw her. Not crying, telling a nurse she did not need a wheelchair, then immediately bumping into something and saying, "Okay, maybe for like 10 feet. Her eyebrow had split where Nate punched her, and they glued it shut with a clear adhesive that made the skin shine. She had a mild concussion, a bruised cheek, and a black eye that fully arrived before dawn, swelling dark and glossy under the hospital lights. Paul Mercer was in another section, separated from us by police, doctors, and the kind of legal caution that settles over everyone after kidnapping. He had 2 cracked ribs, a cut above his ear, burns on his upper arm from the stun gun, and wrists raw from when officers cuffed him before they understood he was not one of the men who had taken his daughter. I saw him only once that night, through the gap in my curtain, wrapped in a blanket with his shoulders bent forward, speaking to a detective. Every few seconds, he looked toward the hall, as if Lily might be brought past him, and he would miss her if he blinked. They found Lily Mercer at 11:48 p.m. That time got fixed in my head because I heard the detective say it twice. She was in the storage room of a closed flower shop on Forest Avenue, a place with a faded awning and metal buckets stacked in the window. Nate Delaney's crew had borrowed a delivery van, parked it behind the shop, and kept her there while using her phone to lure Paul to Bluebells. She had been given something that made her groggy, though not enough to stop her from fighting them at some point. One of the officers told Maya, quietly and not as an official statement, that Lily had kicked one man hard enough to leave blood on her white sneaker. That was why only one shoe had been at Bluebells. The other had stayed with her. When Paul heard she was alive, he made a sound that carried all the way down the hall. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was a broken exhale, like a man who had been holding his breath for hours and found out breath was still possible. Maya heard it too. The nurse had just finished cleaning her eyebrow. Maya closed her eyes, and for the first time since the freezer door latched, her face went loose. "Good," she whispered. Okay, good. Then she threw up into a plastic basin. Trauma has no respect for timing. The police took our statements in pieces. At first in the hospital, then again 2 days later at the station, then once more in a small conference room where a victim advocate kept sliding cups of water toward us, as if hydration could make the story easier to tell. They asked us to describe the man outside. Paul. They asked about the camera system, the freezer alarm, the missing wedge, the texts on Lily's phone, the chain on the back door, the power outage. We told them what we knew and what we didn't. There was more we didn't. That bothered me more than I expected. Nate Delaney was arrested at the shop. His accomplice, the one we'd trapped in the freezer, was named Jason Rourke. He lost no fingers, despite what the first rumors online claimed. He had frostbite on 2 fingertips, a sprained wrist from beating the inside release bar, and a very large list of charges. Third man was caught before sunrise in a motel parking lot near I-295 with Lily's backpack in the trunk of his car. A fourth was identified later through traffic cameras and a partial print on the chain. The chain mattered. The detectives kept coming back to it. So did the wedge. So they knew about the freezer rule. One detective asked Drew, while Maya and I sat in the corner of the conference room, not quite witnesses and not quite furniture. Drew rubbed both hands over his scalp. He looked older than 38 that morning. Somebody knew there was a wedge. Employees, plenty over the years, former employees, yes, customers. He gave a tired laugh. It's an ice cream shop. People can see things. The detective didn't laugh with him. The police theory, as it was explained to us carefully and incompletely, was that Nate's crew had been watching Paul. They knew he was behind on money connected to his brother's debt. They knew his daughter had a phone with location sharing. They planned to panic him, isolate him, and force him to hand over something. Cash, maybe. Information, maybe. Paul never said, at least not to us. Bluebells had been chosen because it sat on a busy street where a desperate man could arrive without drawing attention. But the back alley was narrow, poorly lit, and easy to control. The freezer room was a pressure point. Plant the phone inside, remove the wedge, chain the back door, cut the power at the exterior service box, and the people inside would move where you wanted them. Panic would do the rest. That was the part I kept returning to. They hadn't needed a locked basement or a hidden tunnel or anything elaborate. They used our procedures against us, our habits, our assumptions, the fact that closing employees are tired, that a manager's warnings start to sound like overkill if nothing bad has happened lately, that a missing child turns everyone into someone willing to break rules. The freezer room had one crucial rule, and they knew exactly how to make us violate it. Bluebell stayed closed for 6 weeks. At first, there was yellow tape across the broken front, then plywood, then a handwritten sign taped to the door, closed for REPAIRS. Thank you for understanding. Someone drew a little ice cream cone on it. A week later, somebody else wrote True Crime Sunday in black marker, and Drew went down himself and tore the sign off. The local news ran the story for 3 days. They used a photo of the shop from summer, bright and clean, with a line of tourists out the door. They called Maya and me employees who helped foil an abduction plot, which made both of us stop watching. Paul was described as a local father targeted by criminal associates, which was true, and also so thin it felt insulting. Lily was not named after the first night, which was the only decent thing the coverage did. My dad drove me to my follow-up appointments. He did not know what to say, so he kept saying practical things. Seat belt all right over your ribs. My ribs are fine, Dad. Need me to open that bottle? It's water. You're supposed to keep the splint dry. I know. He fussed because he was scared, and I let him because I was too. At home, I slept in short pieces. 2 hours, then awake. 40 minutes, then awake. Sometimes I woke because I heard the freezer alarm in my dream. Sometimes because my hand throbbed. Sometimes because I could feel, with stupid perfect clarity, the moment the door slammed on my fingers. The pressure, the metal edge, the certainty that the mistake was already made. Maya texted me at odd hours. You awake? Usually I was. For the first week, we didn't talk about anything important. We sent each other photos of terrible hospital socks and videos of dogs falling off couches. Then one night, around 2:13 a.m., she wrote, I keep thinking I should have waited for police. I stared at the message for a long time before answering. Me too. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. But Lily's alive. I typed and erased 6 different responses. Finally, I wrote, both can be true. She sent back a thumbs up, which was not what she meant, and I understood that too. Paul came to see us once, 3 weeks later, after asking through the detective whether it would be okay. We met in the parking lot behind Bluebell's because the shop was still being repaired, and none of us wanted coffee or a sit-down meal or anything that would require pretending. He looked thinner. His left arm was in a sling. Lily was not with him, and I was glad. Not because I didn't care about her, because I didn't want to become part of her story more than I already was. Paul thanked us. Maya said, You don't have to do that. I do, he said, but I know it doesn't fix anything. His voice was steadier than at the hospital, but his eyes kept moving to the back alley. The chain was gone. The door had a new lock, new hinge plates, and a camera above it with a little blinking blue light. Is she okay? I asked. He looked at the pavement. She's alive. She's home. She talks to her aunt more than me right now. Maya nodded. That's still talking. Yeah, he said. That's what they tell me. He apologized too, for breaking the glass, for lunging at us, for getting us involved, even though that part had not really been his choice. Maya accepted it. I did too. Neither of us said it was okay, because it was. Before he left, Paul held out something wrapped in a napkin. Maya opened it. The silver star charm from Lily's sneaker. She wanted you to have it, he said. Both of you, I guess. She said she doesn't want it. Maya's face tightened. She looked like she might refuse, then thought better of making Paul carry it back. Tell her thank you, she said. Paul nodded. After he left, Maya and I stood there behind the shop with the charm sitting in her palm. You take it, she said. No, I don't want it in my apartment. Neither do I, so we gave it to Drew when the shop reopened. He put it in the office drawer under the label printer, beside the new box cutters, spare tape rolls, and a brand new backup wedge. The reopening was quiet. No balloons. No big post online. Drew had the freezer replaced before he agreed to unlock the front door again. Not repaired, replaced. New latch, new interior release, new alarm system, new camera angle, and a rule printed in black letters on a laminated sign. No one enters walk-in freezer without door propped open. No exceptions. There were now 3 wedges. 1 red, 1 yellow, 1 black. Each hung on its own hook with a label. Drew installed a checklist by the closing binder. and you had to initial the freezer check, the backdoor check, and the camera check before setting the alarm. Maya quit 2 days before reopening. She didn't make a speech about it. She texted Drew, returned her key, and told me she had found work at a print shop where the coldest room was emotionally, not physically. We still talked, less often over time, than mostly on holidays, or when one of us saw a news story about bad workplace safety and sent it with no comment. I went back. I wish I had a better reason. Courage, maybe. Closure. The truth is simpler. I needed money, and part of me thought if I didn't return, bluebells would stay frozen in my head forever. So I stood behind the counter with my hand in a splint and scooped flavors one-handed until I learned how to brace a tub with my forearm and make it look intentional. Customers still asked what happened. Drew told us to say, there was a police incident, but everyone is safe now. Everyone is safe now. It became another shop phrase, like, do you want a cup or cone? Or the pistachio has nuts. Technically true. Comforting if you didn't press on it. The first time I had to enter the new freezer, I stood at the threshold for almost a full minute. The light came on immediately. No delay. The shelves were clean. The floor was dry. The temperature display glowed steady. The new emergency release bar was bright green and tested weekly. The red wedge held the door open so firmly that it didn't move when I kicked it. Drew stood behind me without saying anything. You can grab vanilla, he said finally. Or I can. I've got it. My voice sounded almost normal. I stepped in, 3 steps. Vanilla on the left, second shelf. I lifted the tub with my right hand and braced it against my hip. For 1 second, the smell of cold cardboard and sugar tightened around my throat, and my body tried to convince me that the door had moved. It had not. I turned. The door was open. Drew was visible beyond it. The hallway was bright. I walked out. Drew nodded once. That was all. Months later, after the arrests and plea hearings and articles had faded, after my hand had healed stiff but usable, after the scar over Maya's eyebrow stopped looking angry in the photo she sent, I found the old pistachio lid in the office. I was looking for receipt paper. The drawer under the label printer jammed, and when I pulled it too hard, the whole thing came forward with a wooden clatter. Tape rolls spilled. Rubber bands dropped. The silver star charm slid against the side. And underneath, a stack of outdated employee schedules was the lid. Pistachio. Drew's blocky handwriting, date from that morning. I picked it up carefully. There was nothing strange about it. Plastic rim, melt marks, a faint smell of nuts and freezer burn. Evidence should have been collected. Maybe it had been, and this was another lid. Maybe someone had tossed it in the drawer during cleanup without thinking. Maybe Drew had kept it for reasons he never admitted. Then I noticed the inside rim. Small strip of gray tape was stuck there, folded over on itself. The kind used to secure tiny tracking tags or keys under counters. There was a square of sticky residue in the center where something had been removed. I stood in the office doorway, lid in my good hand, listening to the shop around me. A family laughed near the front window. The soft serve machine hummed. Rain tapped the awning outside with a familiar, patient rhythm. From the back hall, the new freezer compressor started, smooth and steady. No delay, no alarm, nothing wrong. I put the lid back under the schedules and closed the drawer. Then I went out front and asked the next customer if they wanted sprinkles. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, Make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another if you dare.